to the Audit Committee of the 30th of July 2020. Just have a few things to say before we move on to the formal agenda for today's meeting. Firstly, the formal legal standing of the meeting is being held under local authorities, police and crime panels, coronavirus, flexibility of local authority and police and crime panels meeting, England and Wales Regulations 2020. To take account of these regulations, Bristol City Council has produced a set of virtual meeting procedure rules, and these are available on our website. This means that any decision made by committee will have the same standing and validity as if it had been held in person in a meeting at City Hall. Can I just ask members of the committee to ensure their sound is muted when they are not speaking, and after you have spoken, please remember to mute your sound again. And if you have any questions during the meeting, please use the raise hand function on Zoom so that I can see you wish to speak and pass this on to the chair, or you can physically indicate that you wish to speak via your video link. So we'll now move on to the formal agenda for the meeting led by the Audit Committee Chair, Councillor Mark Brain. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. So welcome. We don't need any introductions, I think, because everybody knows everybody. There are no planned fire drills. If you see a fire, run out of your house. Apologies for absence. I don't believe we've had any.
We've had apologies from Adebola and Simon Cookson will be late to the meeting, but he will be here before 3 o'clock, Chair. Okay,
declarations of interest. I have one minor thing to declare. In the section on fraud, there's a piece about blue badges, and my wife has a blue badge, though she's not subject to any fraud investigations. Anybody else got any declarations of interest? No. Okay, public forum. Tim Kent has a piece of public forum, which I read this morning. Tim, would you like to speak on your piece of public forum?
Well, I'll be brief. Because we mostly covered this last meeting, but I wanted to sort of just put on the record one of the reasons why I didn't feel I could vote for the accounts last time, and in particular it was because of the mention of a exit package for an officer. Actually, on rereading, as I've been doing, there are several exit packages for officers over £100,000, and my concern there is that the proper procedures regarding those exit packages have not been followed. In particular, I point to the council's pay policy, a document that comes to the council every single year. Within that pay policy actually states the guidance says that full council should have the opportunity to vote before severance packages costing £100,000 or more are paid to employees leaving the council. That is based on the government guidance paper to the Localism Act 2011. It is section 40 and it was published in 2013. I won't bother to read it all because it's there in the statement. I have raised this with the mayor. I received a reply, which is within my statement, that all procedures were followed. I then did follow this up, quoting this regulation. I've not heard anything back, so I will write to the mayor and the chief executive about this. But I felt this was something really needed to be raised with the audit committee, because it is not just about money, but governance as well. And I also wanted to ensure that our external auditor was aware of the issue. It is regarding whether or not we have followed the proper procedure on authorising that payment. And I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Denise, would you like to respond to
that? It's a statement, not a question, but I will respond to confirm that all procedures have been followed. The council's pay policy makes reference to payments to an employee, not payments to the pension fund. Quite often when we do have employees that have long service at all different grades within the organisation, the strain on the pension fund will exceed this payment. The payment policy is focused on payments to employees, and hence that's what it says in the full council pay policy. And therefore I believe that we have followed the appropriate procedure.
Thanks, Denise. Moving on to the next item, which is minutes of the previous meeting, which is a separate document on mod.gov. I have to, before we approve or otherwise the minutes, I have something to say on this one. I have no problem with most of it, but at the end, it says the letter M, the chair referred to the, sorry. The chair referred to the concerns raised by members that there should be parity with scrutiny with respect to access to exempt papers on audit agendas. Now, we had Jeff Gollop draft something for us, which was approved, and we were told that it would be taken from the recording. This isn't it. Fortunately, I've been in touch with Jeff this morning, and I do have the exact wording, which I think should be in the minutes, and I will read it to you. Audit committee is a key part of the authority's governance process and must have potential access to all papers without restriction. It is inappropriate to restrict access or make access more difficult than would be the case for other members of council. The discussion was also very clear that that meant equal access to that of the scrutiny and the cabinet. So I don't know how other members feel, but I feel that should be what's in the minutes instead of what's there already. Any thoughts? No?
Well, we should just get it to reflect what was agreed. As you say, it is on the camera, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And Jeff found his notes, so that was rather lucky. He must keep very extensive notes, I think. But yes. So I would like that inserted in the minutes instead of what's there at present. Can we get that changed, please?
Sorry, Chair, I think Councillor Stevens and Councillor Radford want to say something
Councillor,
on this.
Okay, Councillor Stevens.
I think Liz was first.
Oh, right, okay. In that case, Liz.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. No, just to say that, yes, the wording that Jeff provided was different and we do need to have the correct wording in there.
Thank you, Liz. Clive?
Thank you. I don't know if it's possible just to email that around now, so that we can read it.
Now, possibly.
Has Liz, maybe Liz, while you're chairing, if Liz has got it.
That would be handy. Yeah,
I don't have it. He just read it through to me as well today to say what it should have said.
Okay. Right. I find that quite difficult. I've got enough. I can't cope with all these multitasking now.
Would members be agreeable to circulating that offline and then approving it offline?
Yes, that sounds like a good idea. Okay, we'll do that. Yeah, I'll do it when the meeting's over. Okay, that's fine. Apart from that, does anybody else have anything to say on the minutes? No. Okay. Right. We'll agree the minutes by email if that's okay with everyone, rather than agree them now, because you want to see this first. I know we all heard it before, but you know, it's that was weeks ago. Right. Next item on the agenda is. Finally place the public forum action sheet. Okay. Right. Who's going to lead us off with that one? Nobody. Me then. Okay. Things come out of the action sheet. First question is Clive happy with the response that he got to his email question? Because you had a point on the annual. Yes, I'm registering for staff appraisals, and there is an answer here. Are you content with the answer?
I'm happy with the answer to 2. That's as good as we're going to get, I think, on that. And okay. Obviously, I haven't had an answer to 1, so I'm not so happy about that.
Okay. Can somebody get Clive an answer to question 1?
I can, if there's nobody here from legal. I can't see the non-video participants. Do we have legal representation?
No, Nancy asked if we needed her today. I didn't think you would, so I told her.
I'll follow it up then on Nancy's behalf to try and get confirmation of that for Councillor Stevens.
As the question was in May, it might involve a little bit of digging around to find out what the actual question was. It says a summary of what the powers were. If that's obvious, then that's fine. Otherwise, get back to me and I'll reword my question.
I'll check the minutes and ensure that it's clear. If not, Councillor Stevens, I'll come back to you.
Okay, thanks, Denise. I've had a text message from Chris Jackson. His Wi-Fi's playing up again. He'll get back as soon as he can. He's trying to get back into the system. I'm finding it very difficult. Okay, I've got something kind of out of left field here a bit with regards to the action sheet. We were voting last time. I didn't realise that our two independent members didn't have votes in certain circumstances. Now, I don't want to discuss this today, but I'd like us to discuss it sometime. And so what I'd like members to do, if possible, to go away, give it some thought about, do you think it's a good idea or not for the independent members to have full voting rights? And then perhaps have a discussion at a further later meeting and see what we think. But I don't want to dive into it. And also we've got plenty enough to do today as it is. But I think it's something we should consider and see the Constitution perhaps should or should not be changed. Okay, that's just a heads up, if you like.
Chair, for clarity, the voting rights in relation to approval of the accounts is set out in the SIPFA code rather than our own constitution.
Well, we've broken the code before, so we can. Yeah, I mean, we have members of scrutiny on audit, which is against the SIPFA code as well. So, because we think it's better. So, but it's something to think about, and we may decide not to do it, but that's that. So the next item is the work programme. Does anybody have anything on the work programme? No. Most of it does seem fairly straightforward to me. I mean, a lot of the work programme for audit sets itself anyway. So.
Sorry, Chair, I did have one thing.
Okay, Ollie.
So it took me, I was trying to raise my hand on here and then I had to try and turn on the sound. That seems to be a bit of a nightmare. Anyway, no, it's just a quick one.
Yeah.
Just a quick one. So we last discussed the whistleblowing policy in January, and that was being absorbed into the work of the independent internal audit team. And I wondered if we could have a little update on that. It doesn't have to be a great big report, but an update on it perhaps in September.
Okay. Simba, can we do that one?
Yes, Chairman, you are going to get another update as part of the annual report that we have in this meeting. So, yeah, it's okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be anything.
In fact, Ollie, it says on the 25th of January we have the annual whistleblowing review anyway. Can't hear you, Ollie.
Sorry, Councillor Mead, we don't have your audio. I don't know if there's an issue with your volume, but we can't hear you.
Let's try this.
Yeah.
Hello? Yeah. Oh, cool. So I've whacked it up to high level. Because some of us will be stepping down at the next election, it would be quite nice to know that this was sort of in hand before then. It's just a little update, so we can do some formal work on it in January, but it would be nice to have a little update. That was all.
Okay. Well, January is before the election.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I think we are going to bring another half-year annual report in November. So we'll give you another update in November. We'll give you an update today, and then we'll give another update in November.
Right. Sounds like we've got it covered. Okay. Thanks for that, Ollie. Good thing to keep an eye on. Next item on the agenda.
Sorry, Chair, we have input questions from Councillor Stevens and Kent.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to look at two screens at once.
No, it's fine. It's difficult.
Told you about the multitasking. Okay, fire away, Clive, whilst I find where I am.
Thank you, Chair. Presumably you can't see the automatic hands, so you need Oliver to point them out. No. Yeah, okay, Oliver. So my question is to do with page 9 of the report, and it's 23rd of November meeting. And there we have something called review of a specific corporate risk. So firstly, we have to choose that risk, not necessarily today, but fairly soon. And secondly, and we've discussed it at previous meetings, the way the audit committee needs to look at risk is different than the way that scrutiny does. Scrutiny will be looking at, well, what can be done to mitigate it? You know, what action should be taken? Whereas audit is checking that the risk system is working. So simplistically, are the numbers broadly right? Are they giving it a 5 when it should be a 1, or that type of thing? So I think Denise, Jan Cadby works for you, is that right? So that message needs to go back to Jan, what report we want to look at, and then ideally we look at, are the numbers broadly right, you know, the impact and the probability.
So maybe just to say that the risk reports will come to audit committee as standard. I think what we probably need to do is align the different programs of work. So scrutiny are in the process of constituting their work program for the year, and similarly, scrutiny commissions are in the process of doing that. And similarly, there are some specific areas of deep dive also being requested by the audit committee, and we'll probably just need to agree the parameters of each of those, then that we're clear.
So what I was talking about was the deep dive, but it's a deep dive. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that's discussed at scrutiny. We are checking that the risk management system is working. And some of that involves a deep dive once or twice a year to show that we think that the numbers are being given correctly, the probabilities and the impacts.
So on the work programme, as well as the corporate risk report for Q1 in September's meeting, we're going to bring in a risk management annual report and improvement plan, which will cover off some of the points raised about consistency of reporting and some of the process. So we'll update you then. And I think that's probably a good opportunity to identify where you might want to look further.
You're all avoiding my question, as how it seems.
No, I think it's...
I want to check that on 1 or 2 deep dives, that was the purpose, that the numbers, the risk, the impact is appropriate and the probability is appropriate. That's how we check that the risks, one of the ways we check the risk system is working.
Okay, this is okay. Right. It sounds that there's been some talking at cross purposes, but I think I'm pretty sure I know what Clive means. He wants to take one specific item, and that we just drill down into it, and that we have a choice because we could pick anything within the realm of the council. I don't think we should try and slot in with OSM or the scrutiny process. I think we should be independent, because even if we do pick the same subject, as Clive says, we'll be looking at it in a different way. So we have old risk registers if people do want to see them, and they don't change it so much. So perhaps members, again, as with the voting rights, that perhaps if members want to go away and give this some thought, find issues that they think, or areas of council activity that they think we should be looking at, and then perhaps we'll pull those back together. Hopefully some of us will have the same ideas as each other. If we end up with about 6 or 7 entirely separate ideas, then we might take a while to figure out which one we want. But I think if we do that, and then we could, at the next meeting of the audit committee, we can then agree which one we want. Then officers will know what we want. It'll give them months to get themselves organised and prepare the necessary reports. And if reports may exist already, or half of them, but I think that's the best way forward. And then the members choose, which I think is the best thing. Are we agreed? Yeah, lots of nods and a thumbs up. Splendid. Pardon me. Next item on the agenda is...
Sorry, Chair. Apologies. I still wanted to briefly speak on this. I'm just sort of aware that we haven't penciled in meetings. It was talked about probably the accounts coming back around the end of August. Now, is the plan that will be held at the September meeting? I'll wait a second.
Sorry, it's Jackie ringing me again.
That's all right. I guess my question is, was that for the September meeting, which it already looks quite busy? And one thing I'm aware of as of today, we've got over 350 pages of information to look at, and it really isn't information you can skip. If you skip one page, you have no idea what the other 349 pages mean. So we do slightly overstack the agenda, and that's not just a matter for us, but also the public. We do have a little following, by the way, of this committee.
Really?
So we do. And so I think it's important we make sure we don't overstack meetings. I guess my question is, do we want to put in the diary, even if we cancel it, a meeting for the end of August, beginning of September, and possibly another one in October, because that might be where you're ideally you really want to be trying to agree the accounts. I doubt you want to go much later than that.
So just to inform your decision, the publication is the 31st of August for the actual draft accounts ready for public inspection. So ideally within August for an extraordinary meeting may be a better date rather than September.
I'll turn this phone off in a minute. Right. Okay, I've been trying to follow that whilst battling with Chris Jackson on my telephone. So
we need a mid-August
we're seeing them today. We're due to see them again in November. Yeah. You want to see them a third time somewhere in between.
You legally have to. We have to approve them so the public can comment on the accounts.
Okay.
And at the moment, I think, as Denise reasonably pointed out, there's bits missing, so we couldn't really publish these ones for comment.
To confirm, Chair, the audit committee vote on the audited accounts at the end of the process once the external auditors have made their opinion, rather than prior to. The draft accounts published for public inspection aren't voted on by audit committee. They are seen and asked for commentary. But so yeah, we bring it to you for comment and input. They were voted on until external auditors have formed an opinion.
I mean, the government date, official date, has been extended from July to November. So councils don't have to produce their annual accounts now until November. And I think even that's quite ambitious, given how long the last lot took, and the Grant Thornton have just finished. I know they started on this year's accounts, but I feel they've got a long way to go. As they say in the later report, they're all working from home. They don't know when anyone's going to get sick, and last year's accounts ran over by a year almost. It may be better this time, but I don't see it in the November kind of better, if you see what I mean. So I don't know that we do need to see it again until November, and I have a suspicion that it won't all be ready then anyway. So I don't see the need for an extra meeting. Any other views? Liz has got a hand up.
They're obviously still awaiting the accounts for Bristol Waste and Bristol Energy before these can go for publication anyway to the public. Do we have a date for when we're expecting those to come in?
I don't. Does anybody else?
They're still all work in progress. It's the consolidated accounts to enable us to do the group accounts that we are still waiting for. They're hoping to still achieve the end of August deadline, but that's the actual statutory deadline for completion. They're hoping to, but again, I can't give firm commitments that deadline will be achieved. There's still quite a way to go, particularly as a result of COVID valuations taking place, etc. as well.
So I'm still fiddling with the computer, trying to see if I can see the little blue hands, but I can't.
So I think if we were going to do an extraordinary, it needs to be as close as possible to the end of August. If there is if there's an aspiration to see it, and that's what I would suggest, that it's towards the end of August, where we'll be literally, hopefully, in the position to have finalised and meet this deadline. Okay,
so you think that will be okay if we do at the end of August?
I think it's a matter for committee to decide whether you want to see it. I think Mike has outlined that it's not absolutely required. It's not an absolute requirement, but I think given the fact that you haven't had a chance to truly comment on it and haven't had the papers in sufficient time, that you may want another meeting to actually have a look at the full set once they are there.
Okay, I'm seeing nodding from Clive and from Tim, and nobody else, and from Liz. Okay then. extraordinary meeting at the end of August, to a date to be agreed. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else on the work program? Okay. Moving right along. So, corporate risk management. Denise is presenting this according to my paperwork. Denise.
Shall I come in?
You're presenting it, aren't you?
Yeah, that's me. So this is our quarter 4. Obviously, it comes slightly later here, published for Cabinet previously. So this is the end of the financial year up to the end of March 2019 and 2020. Sorry. Obviously, a lot has changed since then. Although obviously the impact of COVID was reflected in some of this, as this was completed during the sort of April-May months in terms of a report. What I just want to highlight first is the update on our risk management approach and sort of work ongoing in this area. It's been noted in the AGS and internal audit reports over recent years about improving our risk management processes and embedding it across the organisation. We are seeing increased through our new processes. We have increased the team. We've now got the risk and insurance manager in post, and we've recruited, so we have a full team there in terms of the risk and insurance team to progress this work. There's still a lot of work to do embedding risk management across an organisation the size and complexity of ours takes years, but we are making good progress. Over the last year, we've, as I said, strengthened the capacity and sort of embedded those processes. We are now part of the sort of the corporate induction and have been arranging workshops and drop-in sessions with all services across the authority. Going forward, we'll be rolling out a new e-learning across key staff who are responsible for risk management, looking at member training, maturity assessments on how well we manage risk across the authority. We'll also be implementing a new risk management database to better report and record risks across the authority, both strategic and operational. We now meet on a quarterly basis as a corporate risk management group, which is chaired by myself. Our corporate risk manager, Jan Cadmy's on there, but also covers health and safety, business continuity, audit for assurance purposes. So that's some of the, and then at the next meeting of audit committee, we'll be bringing an annual risk management report, which will cover, and an annual plan, which will cover all of this in a bit more detail. So on to the corporate risk report in terms of the risks. At the end, there's one critical risk that's flagged, and that's the financial framework Mtfp. Obviously, the impact of COVID has had significant impact on our finances, and when this was reported at the end of March, obviously there was significant uncertainty for the council's finances over the 5 years, dependent on what comes out. There is still uncertainty, and that is being managed and reported regularly to Cabinet. There's 3 new threat risks that are identified: the supply of affordable housing not being sufficient to meet community needs, failure to deliver the climate emergency action plan and the city's climate strategy, and also failure to deliver the joint spatial plan. And that within the current existing risks, one's improving, and that's the delivery of the council's clean air plan as progress on delivery of that progresses. But then 6 deteriorating risks, one being the financial framework, and 2 other finance related ones in terms of the in-year financial deficit, and long-term commercial investments and major projects, the delays and the cost overruns, the risk of those, fraud and corruption, capital transport programme delivery, and in terms of the delivery of affordable and homes to meet Bristol's needs are deteriorating risks. So the full risk register is there in your pack, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Okay, I know there were a number of questions. I want to get a couple of things in first. Within this, the Colston Hall is included, and I just probably people have seen it, but on the 11th there's going to be a briefing on the Colston Hall, and I think it'd be useful for members of audit to attend that briefing, because we might learn a lot more about it. That would be useful. Right, I'll take questions. I think Clive had his hand up. Yep, and Tim did as well. I don't know who was first. Clive first.
Thank you. Just a couple of ones, Michael. Thank you for that. First one, it's the risk of fraud. I'm just wondering if your judgment is, because of COVID and lots of people working from home, whether the risk of fraud has gone up or whether you actually think it's gone down. You know, a lot of fraud is prevented by people cross-checking and cross-signing and stuff. So maybe that doesn't occur. But on the other hand, maybe other checks are occurring better. So that's my first question. And the second one's about the joint spatial plan. Let's do fraud first.
Shall I take the one in terms of the risk of fraud? Predominantly what we're seeing here is a change in the actual climate in which we're operating in, and the environment in which we're operating in, predominantly resulting from COVID, but also as a result of having to change legislation at pace. This is from a national level, reflected down to local levels, and the need to be able to provide economic support to a range of different businesses, individuals, and to do that and as least in a way that can ensure that those that need the support are able to access it in the most efficient as possible way. Some other mechanisms have been put into place, but what we have seen is that across not only this organisation, but more nationally, increased levels of attempted fraud, etc. So we've had to rethink some of our policies, processes and approach, but trying to do that in a way that still allows us to be diligent, but to be able to get the support to those that most need it at pace.
Okay, because obviously there's huge amounts of money being pushed out. I noticed what we're looking at is the fraud up until the end of March. So of course, any COVID-related fraud probably wasn't built into that.
COVID picked up as part of this. COVID started to, instances and issues attributed to COVID happened before the end of March, so are therefore reflected in this report.
Okay, thank you for that. And the other question is the joint spatial plan.
Well, on that last point, and the thing we all have to bear in mind is that criminal world tends to be more fleet of foot than we are. So, for example, while shoplifting went down when the shops were shut, someone tried to smuggle £1 million worth of cocaine into the country hidden inside PPE equipment. They were caught, fortunately. But we are a proper organisation with proper structures and checks and balances and all the rest. And criminals are going to be faster than we are, so we do have to be mindful of that. Right, Clive.
Yeah, just on a joint spatial plan, obviously that got canned in the autumn, and in fact the inspectors killed it last summer, and yet we're looking at a risk now that talks about failure to deliver joint spatial plan. It just makes me think that this is perhaps a little bit out of date. I'd be grateful for comments on that, because part of Audit's role is to audit those numbers, and it strikes me that the failure of joint spatial plan is absolute, it's gone, and therefore it should have a 5 and not which is definite.
So
for likelihood, yeah.
So I suppose in terms of the previous joint spatial plan that was stopped, that's an issue. So in this is a risk report, so it's things that might happen in terms of if it's an issue and being dealt with, that wouldn't form part of this report. So this is the further joint spatial plan. So a failure to deliver, obviously, there is plans to progress with a new joint spatial plan, and it's still failure to deliver that and the outcomes desired by it, rather than the actual end in itself.
So maybe it's just an issue of wording, because I know WECA has now launched this spatial development strategy, which is to take over the phoenix. Is that right? Phoenix is rise up from the ashes. So just to show that I read them, Michael.
Thank you. We'll take that on board. I'll speak to Zoe about the wording of this to make sure it reflects the actual risk by not having a plan in place, rather than the actual delivery of a plan.
When is a strategy not a plan, and when is a plan a strategy? Different. There's a whole thesis on that one. But when can we expect this non-plan that is now a strategy to surface?
So it will be a matter, I mean, we'd need to refer that to our planning colleagues in terms of how work is developing in that regard.
Okay.
Hopefully the Q1 risk report will give an update in terms of actions being proposed or taken in delivering the need associated to the JSP.
So I was not expecting next week or something then. Okay, all right.
Well, it's not far off next week. I've got a whole host of meetings scheduled now, and that's always the start, isn't it, of council?
Okay, thanks, Clive. Tim had his hand up earlier. Tim?
Thanks. Ironically, I was going to raise the issue of the joint spatial plan, because I did feel the entry was a little Kafkaesque in its approach. Clive covered that relatively well, but I mean, it was written as if, firstly, as if we had decided to withdraw, whereas in fact the inspectors basically told us to don't go away and don't come back, was pretty much what their letter said. It is true that I think a mayoral spatial plan is now on the cards, which no one's tried before, so that's going to be fun. I suspect there will be very little progress till after the elections of the regional mayor. But to get back to my main point, my real concern about this risk register is looking through it. I am very confused, in fact, disappointed, I'd say. See, once again, on the corporate risk register, SEND is not listed. And this has been raised before at people's scrutiny and a desire that it be added to the corporate risk register. And if we go through what has happened in SEND, we lost a court case at the High Court where we lost a judicial review and part of the council's budget was struck down, probably for the first time ever in the history of Bristol City Council. Added to which, we now know that all EHCP applications are not dealt with in the legal timeframes. We know annual reviews are never dealt with within the legal timeframes. The amount of regulation we fail to meet is in the thousands each year. It seems remarkable to me, given the risk around SEND, that this is not in the corporate risk register. And I think perhaps that's an indicator, I'm afraid, of how serious it's being taken, because it should be there.
I thought I saw it somewhere. I've seen SEND in the document somewhere today. I can't say whether it's in here or not.
It is mentioned in later documents.
Okay,
Not in the
that's where I saw it then.
register.
It's in the internal auditor's report.
Can I take that matter back to the Director for Children's Services to think about how we want to take this forward? I haven't gone through the service risk register, which I would expect would have SEND on there, but I take the point and will raise that with the director.
It is a reputational risk, certainly, yes. Okay, thank you for that, Tim. Very helpful. Yeah, good. Liz, yes.
Firstly, I just wanted to say well done on trying to get the new structure and the new processes in place for this corporate risk register, because it's a huge animal and lots of different departments to try and work with. So trying to get this on board and making it work for us is really important. So thank you. I think as well, looking through the risk register and internal audit report, there are quite a few things that that come up in both. And for us as an audit committee, we need to make sure that those issues are being taken forward and from a governance point of view are working. One thing that instantly popped up for me was under the long-term commercial projects and looking at whether we have enough commercial experience in our teams, and then looking at internal audit report, them actually looking at that as well. So we need to make sure that we're keeping an eye on both of these reports together, I think.
And I'm certainly with regard to the commercial experience, when we started looking at commercial opportunities, I was totally convinced we didn't. But we do have last time, it's been a while since I've seen a report to I can't remember the person's name, but it's been a while since I've seen a report to resources scrutiny, and I think we do have somebody there now who is fully aware of the situation. We're a public sector organisation. You don't expect the public sector to be entrepreneurial by nature. So I said it. So it takes a bit of a culture shift here and there. But I wish I could remember the officer's name. But she struck me as being on the ball. That's all I can say.
It's Penny Fell. I think for the new scrutiny commission, there is generally a report that comes through annually on update on commercial and innovation work. It may well be on the Resources Scrutiny Commission work plan.
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, I think people are following that, but good thing to raise all the same. There was something besides commercial, wasn't there, Liz?
My only other comment was on with regard to we were looking at the adult social care, and it mentions that there's going to be a one-off payment to social workers. I just wanted to check because it doesn't say that in the children's social care section. Are they all getting a one-off payment?
Does anybody here know?
I'm not sure which report we're referring to. Is that within the risk report?
It's in the corporate risk register and under the adult, hold on, I need to go back into my ModGov.
Yeah, I remember seeing this as well, Liz, yeah. What is this saying? Adult social care, social workers are going to get a lump sum payment. And Liz's question is, will the children's social workers be getting the same thing?
I don't believe they are, but again, you would need to refer that back to the Executive Director to give a firm response as to the proposals, and if not, to explain to Councillor Radford why not. You'd probably want a more detailed response than what I'm able to give. So can we take that back and provide a written response back to that?
That would be useful, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Liz. I have one. Is nowhere near as serious as the previous questions, but nevertheless a curious one, because on the little arrows that go up and down or sort of sideways, saying that things are the same. When we come to business continuity and council's service resilience, we've got staying the same, and I find that a little odd because I'm surprised it hasn't improved as a result of dealing with a real crisis, because for years we've been planning for hypothetical ones of various kinds, and now we've actually experienced one. So I would have thought we'd be better rather than sideways. I thought we would look, officers all over the organisation would have learnt lessons should something like this happen again.
So again, it's the timing difference, isn't that, as well, that we need to think about in terms of this report, which was the end of the financial year, and where I think the major incident had only just then been declared. It would be useful to look back when we then get a more current report. And we also have separate risks for COVID and how COVID was being managed as well in terms of a detailed risk register. But I think it's the timing difference playing out in the report.
That's good. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Of course it is. I was just concerned that officers might be underselling themselves, because they must have. I'm sure we'll find out eventually some amazing things were done by officers to deal with this. Okay. Anything else on the risk report? No. Okay. In that case, we move to the internal audit annual report, agenda item 9, and that will be Simba.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, all. I'm pleased to present to the committee the 2019-20 internal audit annual report. The committee will be aware that the public sector internal audit standards require the chief internal auditor to provide an annual opinion that informs the annual governance statement. That opinion should conclude on the adequacy and effectiveness of the council's framework of governance, risk management, and internal control. My annual opinion is informed largely by the results of the internal audit work, which arises from the approved annual plan. I also use other sources of assurance, for example, from business assurance statements and then external inspections. Some of these are well detailed in the annual governance statement, which is a separate agenda item. Mr. Chairman, my opinion is that limited assurance can be given that in 2019-20, the council's system of internal control, governance, and risk management were adequate and operating effectively. This is the 4th consecutive year a limited assurance opinion has been given. I read this conclusion based on the Annexure A, which is part of my report, which shows that 47% of the audits completed at a limited assurance opinion. And I also indicate that there are some areas that still require improvement. The committee should note that within Annexure A, which lists all the audit outcomes, there are a number of audits with limited assurance that I have not presented to the audit committee. We'll do that in the next meeting. The reason why I didn't bring them to this meeting is that this is a very, very long meeting with long agenda items. So we wanted to give you enough time for you to consider those reports. Page 4 and section 3 of my report indicates or lists some of the areas that require improvement. In making this conclusion, I also acknowledge that Bristol City Council is a big organization, very complex, and with many priorities. So there will be instances where some risks will crystallize. Mr. Chairman, despite my opinion that I've just given of limited assurance, I'm also pleased to advise about the positive trajectory to improvement that I'm starting to see emerging. And there are a number of reasons that I would allude to this. Firstly, during the year, there's been evident increased collaboration between internal audit and senior management through the new client engagement model that we introduced. There has been significant effort by senior management to address some of the long outstanding recommendations. You will be aware that I reported that we followed up on 2718 and 2018-19 outstanding actions, and most of them have now been cleared and closed. You'll be aware that we brought to the audit committee the revision of our assurance opinion, and I'm pleased to report that the revised assurance opinion are consistent with the CIPFA guidance that was published in February 2020. During the year, and probably in quarter, probably start of this year, we have implemented a new audit management software called Pentana. That audit software will result in automating the following up of audit actions, which makes it easier for senior management to deal with any outstanding actions. We also brought the comment that we introduced the agreeing of audit action rather than audit recommendations. The limited assurance opinion has been reflected on by CLB, and they acknowledge it. And as they've responded in the AGS, they are committed to putting in, they've asked us actually to undertake a root cause analysis to enable to identify the root causes rather than just focusing on symptoms. So I am convinced that senior management, our commitment to ensuring that we have a reasonable assurance or better opinion in the near future. The committee will need to note that the performance of internal audit is in section on page 8, which looks at our performance against the set targets. The standards also require me to maintain an internal audit charter and quality assurance improvement program. The committee again will recall that in November, we brought to the committee a revised charter, a revised internal audit strategy, as well as a quality assurance improvement program, which was approved. I don't want to raise any issues in relation to fraud, as there's a separate annual report, except for the committee to note the good results that are summarized in this report. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I would like to report that nothing has occurred during the year that has impaired my personal independence or objectivity. I'll end by thanking my internal audit colleagues for their hard work, senior management and the committee for their support. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Simba. That's an excellent and concise report, and it's easily understandable, which cannot always be said about council reports, but yours certainly is. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've like you, I find the 47% figure where it's most, for me, it's the most actually concerning thing in the entire agenda for this meeting, is that means 53% of limited assurance, and the matter for serious concern, it's improving though, as you say, improving for the first time in about 4 years. So that is something, and the process must be hampered by COVID and the fact that people are doing things that they weren't doing before and trying to, keep services going. And certainly in the earlier days of the crisis, that would certainly have been the case. So that doesn't make life any easier for them and or for you or for us. But this is certainly something that next year's audit committee need to be on top of. Whoever it is, it won't be me, and it won't be Clive, and who else I don't know. But it won't be Ollie. That's right. But whoever's it won't be Liz. Oh, another one bites the dust. But whoever gets stuck with this job next year, this is one of the most important things they need to keep an eye on. But I'm pleased that this is turning around, and so I say thank you for the report. Any questions from anyone? Clive, Liz, Clive first.
Thank you. Just one actually. Simba, in the last few years, Alison Mullis has provided a questionnaire for individual members of audit committee to feed back in, and I think it's to do with the internal audit annual report, but I can't quite remember. If not, it was the annual governance. Oh, Alison's on, so she can tell us. So Alison, you know the report because we've done it last 3 years, although I know the numbers participating have been declining, haven't they?
Yes, that's the audit committee's own effectiveness survey. So that's covered when we cover your annual report. We were planning to do that in March.
Okay.
But then the March meeting was the one which was affected by COVID, so that part of the meeting didn't take place. We do actually have plans to convene separately, perhaps in September time, to do that with the committee.
And so that's not for this report then?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Clive. And it was Liz.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, I was pleased to see that there was a slight increase for those cases with reasonable assurance. But I'm hoping at some point we can get back to the 2015 levels, which were still not fabulous, but they were a lot better. First, I was looking at the grants that you had to validate. I was going to ask if the records were better this year. I know in the past we've had some issues with been giving very short deadlines for signing off these certificates, and I wanted to check, was it better this time? Did you get better information, and was there any chance we had to pay any money back?
I think just to respond now, I don't think there were significant issues around compliance or documentation that have been raised. So I would think that the process is improving.
And we didn't have to pay any money back? No.
No, I don't think.
That's good. With regard to recruitment, I know it's been really hard for you to get enough people for your team. And I know that's been partly due to the market. I wondered how many temporary and empty positions you currently have.
So at the moment, we have in 10 out, we've got 4 vacancies, 3 group auditors and 1 auditor.
Right.
But we have been fortunate that for this financial year, we've been able to appoint 2 fixed-term group auditors. So instead of bringing in expensive agency staff, we've been able to bring in fixed-term contractors on the same salary as group auditors. So that's a bit better. But
okay.
We need to, I mean, I'm talking to Denise, we need a long-term approach to dealing with this in terms of how do we structure our delivery model in terms of collaboration, including increased sharing service with other local authorities. But there's need to have a stable internal audit, very, very stable core team is required. But then we can look at other options in terms of how can we deliver some of those complex reviews.
So is the market still very similar in that it's very hard to recruit staff?
I think because of the ambitions and the size of the organization, we are competing with some of the bigger players in terms of the people we want in the organization. I don't think the environment is now about what we were 10 years ago, where we're just a local authority. But if you look at the council, plus the group of companies and the ambition that it has, then we have to compete with the commercial market. So yes, it is actually a challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Liz. Following on from that, yeah, I see you, Tim. I just want to come to this. What sort of salaries are we paying compared with the people we're competing with? Are we on par? Are we, you know, quite good, or are we a long way behind, or how is it?
And I think it depends. I think it depends on what we are looking at, because the big difference is that when you move into specialized areas, for example, IT, and talk about commercial, we are very far off. We don't compete. So it's very difficult to attract, to take somebody, for example, from an accounting firm to come and be a principal auditor, to be able to deliver those high level audits. It's very difficult. But I think in terms of the team that I have to deliver the core, I think we are okay. But I think the challenge is on some of those highly specialized reviews and some of the emerging risks. So on that basis, we don't compare favorably.
Okay, thanks. That's very helpful. Had you finished, Liz, before I bring Tim in? You had. Tim.
Thanks. I just wanted to say something very briefly, because I know I'm sort of the misery of the meeting. I normally have the room. So I just wanted to say thank you for your report. I found it very interesting. I know it is the internal auditor's job to deliver bad news to his bosses, but I thought it was easy to read and not always the information you want to hear, but something we need to hear as an audit committee. So thank you very much. So thank you to you and your team.
Good. Liz.
Apologies, there was one other thing I had forgotten. A while ago, we asked for a list of all the issues that were still outstanding from your internal audits that had been on outstanding for a period of time, so that we could see how long some of these were taking to be resolved. And at some point we did get one of those, but I haven't seen that for a while. And from that we were able to say, well, actually, we may want to bring some people in to explain why they haven't completed the assurances that you'd asked them to do. So is that list available, or can we get that again at some point?
I think some of things might have been taken over by events, because you remember that during the year, I think probably in March or January, where we spoke about the work that we're doing around the long outstanding actions. So we went back and looked at all the 17, 18, and 18, 19. So we have looked at all those actions, and I'm able to report that most of them have been cleared. But I think what we hope to do is that, because we now have a new audit management software, which will enable us to do live reporting. So it will be very easy that at any given time, we'll be able to run a report that will indicate any audit actions that should have been implemented and the outstanding, and we'll bring that to the audit committee as we go on. We just need a bit of time to embed the process, but that can be done as part of the internal audit activity report that we give you at every meeting, but it can be done.
Okay, that would be really useful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Liz. Thanks, Simba. Okay, anything else on the internal audit before we move on? No. Okay, splendid. We're now on the annual fraud report, which is also Simba.
No, I need to take a break. Andrea will take the report. Andrea is the audit manager in charge of counter fraud.
Okay, thanks, Simba. Andrea.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is our annual fraud update report for 1920. It sets out the work that we've done over the year, some of our successes, some of the key initiatives that we've worked on, and I hope it demonstrates the sort of varied work of our team. I will just run through some of the key features of the report. On page 2, we have the savings that we generated from counter fraud and investigation work. of which there's 1.2 million of recoverable cashable savings. I would point out that not all of that is down to us. We're quite often working with other teams, and in particular the work we do with local taxation on NFI, on the SPD, single person's discount. They play a significant part in producing those results. Moving on, I will explain about the different savings there. We have recoverable, which is the cashable savings. There's also notional savings, which is where we try to estimate the cost of fraud, and we actually use notional figures in those instances. And we also report a weekly cost avoidance figure, which is where we cancel a benefit or something like that. So we measure there's an ongoing saving there. Moving on to some of the key initiatives, and key being the word there, we did a key amnesty at the start of last financial year. Although it sort of was not so much a key amnesty, it turned out to be more sort of publicity drive really about tenancy fraud. It did yield some good results for us. It increased our referrals. We did have some voluntary surrenders of properties, and also for our housing association as we worked with them on that. And also we had some keys were just handed in of cases where we previously investigated them without any sort of explanation. So it could well have been, hard to say it's definitely down to the key amnesty, but could well have been. So we did achieve our target in tenancy fraud. We had a target of 40, we recovered 41 properties or other positive outcomes, which that can be a cancellation of an application for housing or a cancellation of a right to buy application. We also had our first ever prosecution case of a direct payment case, so that was an interesting one. I will also give you a bit of an update. It was mentioned earlier about whistleblowing, and you wanted an update on that. There is a bit of an update in this report. The whistleblowing responsibility has now moved to internal audit as from 1st of April. All of the actions that were in the plan and that were due have happened. We were a little bit late with some of the publicity around the transfer of the whistleblowing. That was partially due to COVID-19, and a lot of the comms were all around coronavirus. So we weren't able to get the publicity out quite as quickly as we like, but we have now, that has now happened. We do want to do more around raising awareness of whistleblowing across the authority. We're thinking of some sort of combined whistleblowing and fraud training, fraud awareness training. What else? Oh yeah, I will talk to you about what's happened this year, although this is about the 1920 report largely and the work that we've done in that year. We have done over the last 4 or 5 months, we've worked predominantly on the council's response to COVID-19 and the distribution of the business grants. The authorities paid out around about 90 million to small businesses within Bristol. We have done an awful lot of work in trying to do those prepayment checks up front to make sure that there isn't any fraud there. There will be some fraud without a doubt and some mistakes because it was such a high pressured process to actually get the money out to people, but we did as much prepayment checking as we could, and we've outlined some of what we've done in the report. We do plan to report in more in depth on that work later on in the year, probably at the half yearly stage. There's also been an increase in scams over that time, so we do have a programme of work to pick up on those high risk areas. Moving on to what's planned for the future, we are wanting to do more, make more use of data analytics across the team, and we're currently recruiting a data analyst. At the moment, we already have one senior data analyst, and we want to make much more use of that, and we're looking to bring in a fraud data hub within the year. We've also got a couple of other exercises. We're doing some work on multi-story blocks, and we will do some targeted tenancy fraud work around certain multi-story blocks. Ultimately, we want to do them all, but we have to start somewhere. And as I mentioned, we'd like to do more about raising awareness of fraud and the work of the team, and also about whistleblowing. That's all I had to say. If there are any questions.
Okay, before Clive's had his hand up. Before bringing Clive in, I noticed that section 2.6, it said that due to the team's success in its work with local taxation of business rates and tenancy fraud, it was shortlisted for a national award in these two categories. It doesn't. The award ceremony didn't take place due to COVID, but I was just, what was the name of the award that you were shortlisted for?
It was the SIT for Fighting Fraud and Corruption Locally Award.
Okay, well,
so SIT for Fighting Fraud and Corruption Locally is the national strategy for local authorities on managing fraud.
Well, I'm sure I will agree with you. On behalf of the Audit Committee, please offer my congratulations and those of the committee to the team for being shortlisted for the award. And I hope once COVID is over, you win it. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right, questions, Clive?
Thank you, Chair. Andrea, I've always been very interested in whistleblowing, and I had a long chat with someone working for an NHS trust in the southwest over the weekend, who explained why she wasn't going to whistleblow, and I then explained how our systems, and the fact we're a council, you have councillors who check these systems, and she said luxury, but she just did not trust the chain of command up where she worked. So I note on page section 11 of your report, you said at point 4 in the table, it's a quarterly report on number of whistleblowing, and you've got 0. So I'm assuming that means that nobody's come forward in those 3 months, yeah?
Yeah, that is correct. Nobody has come forward in those 3 months. We hadn't done the publicity. That happened at the end of June. We have subsequently had one whistleblowing case come in. I do
typically how many do you get in a year? It can't be many.
About 9.
Okay.
7 to 9.
Okay. I mean, it's just brought home to me last weekend how important it is to have a system that encourages it. Moving on to your Appendix 1, and it was really interesting to read the type of corporate frauds we get. So it's really, it's the first time I've seen it, or if it's come before, I've not noticed it so much. I was wondering whether whistleblowing helps you in finding out about the corporate fraud that's going on, whether it's other people snitching on their colleagues. Any of those on Appendix A come from whistleblowing? Perhaps you don't know.
I probably can answer that today. Some of them do come from whistleblowing. We have had.
Okay. I don't want a detailed inquiry, so don't go away and spend hours doing it. I just wanted to get a feel. Yeah.
Yeah, we will report again on whistleblowing, and so we can make sure that we include that in our next report.
Yeah, for me, I just think it's really important we keep hammering this home that Bristol City Council is an open employer, and if you think something dodgy is going on, you are safe. And compared with what I learned at the weekend, we are much safer than another organisation I was hearing about.
Okay, Simba wants to come in.
The reason why we are bringing the Appendix A to the committee, we want the committee to be aware. It was one of the reasons why people didn't have a lot of trust and confidence in our processes, the lack of transparency. So what we're trying to do is to ensure that whatever is brought to us, we report the outcomes so that the people who have raised the issues, we have the confidence that whatever they've raised is being acted upon and action is being taken. That's the reason why we also want to ensure that the committee sees all what we are doing so that at least can get assurance that we are acting on whatever we've received.
Okay, thanks, Simba. Liz.
I just wanted to say that this is a really good piece of work. I was very impressed with everything I saw in this report. So thank you very much indeed. It's been a tough year. And I think what I've seen here for the last quarter is really, really impressive. And I was really pleased that whistleblowing has come under you guys in internal audit, because I think people will feel more trusting to contact you and feel that they are being looked after. I'm not saying that they weren't in the other environment, but I think under internal audit, they will feel a lot more secure. So, so thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on the full report before we move on? Nope. Okay. Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you for your report. As Liz said, an excellent report.
Thank you.
Okay. Bear with. I'll be glad when we get back to real meetings. I mean, this technology is wonderful, but Zoom is not my friend. I just about cope with it, is how it is. Oh yeah, Audit Committee annual report to full council. I was in the right place all along. How great. Okay. So I don't know when this will be happening, because normally I think it would have happened by now for the 1920 year. And normally the person who does it is the person who's chairing it last year. So I think they got Liz's name spelled wrong. It's Radford and not Radforth. So that needs to be changed. Just a minor point there, but probably not minor to Liz. There was something else I was going to. Oh yes, of course. So one of the things I thought was that the motion that we discussed earlier in the minutes, when it talks about priorities for 2020 and 2021, either within the text or when speaking in the council chamber, I'm going to highlight that because I think that's the way that's going to get out into the and people will take notice that it won't get buried because it's otherwise it'll just be some little tantrum that happened in our living rooms on computers sometimes. Sometimes nobody took any notice. So I would prefer that the motion that we passed previously actually goes in their priorities for 2020 and 2021. Aside from that, I'm happy with it. But has anybody else got anything to say on it? I think Clive made it by a nose there. Clive?
Thank you. A very short nose. I think on 4 points, if you're going to give a talk to this, Mark.
I usually do, yeah.
4.6 is a good one. And that's about current momentum in improving the council's controls, governance and risk management. It might be worth giving a little example on each of those about what we've done. So if Alison or Simba can furnish you with those, Mark, because I think it brings that it's sort of a bit theoretical in there, and it's bringing reality home to all our councillor colleagues. The audit committee does have teeth. Okay,
that's a really good idea. Alison, do you think you could put a couple of things together for me?
Yes, that's absolutely fine, Chair. And can I just clarify the thing you want bringing forward into the priorities? Is that the changing of your terms of reference, which is mentioned at 4.2?
Is the change in terms of reference that well, the access to documents? I mean, you weren't around for that massive discussion on the annual accounts. But yeah, the thing that should have been in the minutes now, but for whatever reason is not. It's a motion we passed last time saying that the crux of the thing is that members of the audit committee should have the same access to council documents as the cabinet do, because we had a thing where we had a report that was that was confidential, and instead of getting on our computers like Osm did, Tim and others had to go into the council house and look at pieces of paper. They weren't allowed to take notes and all the rest of it. And we just thought that audit committee, if nobody else really, should have full access to documents. Otherwise, how can we provide any kind of assurance at all? So okay. That's the thing. But when I send this wording out, I'll send it to you as well.
Brilliant. Okay.
All right, and then yeah, okay, Simba.
I get your point, Chairman. I think what we shouldn't do is to put that wording in this annual report. I think what would be good is when you present this report in the full council, you can then talk about that wording, because we made the decision in this financial year, not last year. So you could actually talk to that, but not to amend this annual report.
Okay. I was thinking of this because there's a section where it says priorities for 2020 and 2021, and to get this changed would be a priority for 2020-21, at least coming into the start of the next next municipal year. We can't change it before the next municipal year. Would that we could, right? But at least whoever's doing this job, if we're successful, whoever's doing this job next year won't have to go through what Councillor Kent went through when he had to go into the office and read it and then walk off and hope he can remember what he just read. I think it is appropriate to put it in the report, and I think it also gives it it'll give it a higher profile if we put it in the report than if I just mention it, because again, the number of councillor speeches that get forgotten after a while, it's amazing. So I'd rather have it written down and all of that. I'm getting nods from Clive as well. I'm from Liz. Yeah, I'm Tim. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I think I would rather go that way, but I mean, thanks for the suggestion all the same.
All I really wanted to say was actually just endorse what you've just said. I just think it should be written in the report. The June meeting is referenced anyway in the report, because of course we were dealing with business from the previous year. Yeah. The reason we had to move the motion was because of an outcome of dealing with that business from the previous year. And if it's not written in the report, as you sort of said, speeches are easily forgotten. At least it's there in writing. Just sort of clarify, we did have access also via Zoom. We were allowed to make notes, but they had to be destroyed at the end. But my computer actually destroyed them before we even got to the meeting, which was very kind of it. So I didn't have those. And the point we were trying to say is that we should have the same level of access, yes, either as cabinet or at least a scrutiny management committee, which has a legal right to access. We had to use our councillor's right to inspect. And that of course brought in these additional barriers. And as an audit committee, really we should have the right to roam wherever we feel we need to go, and barriers shouldn't be able to be put up there. Obviously a lot of that information was confidential and we have to treat it as confidential, but it's ensuring really that a future audit committee can investigate whichever administration is in power. It's not a political point here. And I think it would be good to have that motion there written in the report. Probably, you're probably right, actually, in the future section, actually, is probably the right place. And at least then we've highlighted, because it would require at least a change of our terms of reference and maybe the council's constitution to state that we have that power, because it's going above and beyond the power that we currently have within the law.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Very helpful. John Roberts and Ollie Mead have little blue hands up. We'll go to John Roberts first. John.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Just a couple of points from me on para 414, which relates to the external audit, and just two corrections actually to that para. One talks about the statements of accounts being signed outside the statutory deadlines. That's not actually correct. They're certainly signed off outside the expected timescales, but I think it's important to make the point that neither the auditor or the council has actually been in breach of any statutory deadlines regarding the audited accounts.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the final point, the accounts were, however, finally signed off in June 2020, should read July 2020.
Both correct. Thank you very much, John. Ollie had his hand up.
Yeah, it's just a quick point, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, cool. That's all right. Just making sure my volume was on the right level. Yeah, so it was about what you and Tim were discussing just now. I mean, initially it was just you'd have to go in physically to see it, and it was definitely they seemed to change their mind after I'd made it clear that for those of us who were not who were sort of shielding and you know, for good health reasons, not prepared to put our health on the line to read a report, that I'd be making a formal complaint about it. Suddenly we got the offer of a Zoom option that we could book in so that we could watch a council officer turn pages remotely for us, and which seemed like the most bizarre thing. But it was also the fact that it was a paper. It was, I can see you laughing, Sharon. It is funny in a way, but it's also frustrating. But it was also the fact that it was a paper on our agenda for discussion. I can understand if there was a report about something that was nothing at all to do with our meeting, then I can understand there being the usual right to inspect as councillors being applied to that. But it was, we were being told we had the right to inspect it as councillors. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, but we also ought to be able to read it because we are going to be discussing it at a meeting. It's a very different kind of thing. So it's about making sure that if it's on our agenda, we should have the papers, really. I think it's the gist of it.
Yeah.
And especially given that 2 other groups of people had already had access to it.
Okay. Tim? No, sorry. Right then.
Sorry, Chair, just to confirm, I believe it's going to full council in September for you. So we'll get those amendments made and submit it through.
Okay, that's great. And I'll get the other amendment to you, and then that's fine. What day is it? Oh, it's okay. No holiday in September this year. Okay. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Next item. Bristol Holding. So we have report of Penny Fell, Director of Commercialisation and Citizens on Bristol Holding. Is that right? Yes.
Yeah, I'm just letting them in the meeting now, Chair, so they should be here.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair. It's Penny.
Good afternoon, Penny.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Afternoon.
Chair, we're joined by Chris Home and also Helen Davis, Shareholder Liaison Manager.
Okay.
Hello, Chair.
Hi, Chris. Right, when you're ready.
Thank you. So Chair, I'm just going to hand straight over to Chris, although the reports come forward in my name. It's Chris's report in essence, so I'm going to hand straight to him for the detail rather than detaining you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, when you say it's actually my report, it's actually the report of the Holding Audit and Risk Committee report. So this is a report that's been approved by that committee for submission to yourselves to give you some assurance in terms of the work that has been undertaken by the Bristol Holding Audit and Risk Committee since its inception in September when we reinvigorated Bristol Holding. But also, clearly prior to that, there were the 2 separate audit committees of Bristol Waste and Bristol Energy, respectively. So the report summarises some of the key activities. It gives you the terms of reference that were agreed by the ARC since when it was set up, which I'm happy to answer any questions on. And obviously, a key area for the ARC has been the development and the embedding of a risk management strategy and approach for all of the companies. And for your noting, I've also attached that as reference. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, any questions for Chris? Tim? Tim, you're up.
Sorry, I didn't expect to beat Clive to it. He normally is so much faster than me that I was expecting to come second. Okay, I have a few issues I wanted to raise when I read this report. I did actually send an email 24 hours ago asking for access to further documents referenced in the report, but unfortunately it doesn't seem to have been seen. So I'll go with what we read here. So my concern is, and I have a few questions actually, but I think perhaps I'll go on the concern that the major remit of Bristol Holdings is really to make sure that our sub-companies are managed well And then an audit committee appears to have been established with only 2 members on it. It has only attempted to meet twice and only once was quorate, according to this report. Is that correct?
So the audit committee it meets quarterly. So yes, in the 6 months that it's actually met 3 times, because this is purely in 1920, but it was always determined that it would meet as a quarterly audit and risk committee. There are currently 2 members, although by the time we have the next audit committee, there will have been 3 members. So a further member has been appointed to the committee.
My concern is really the amount of priority that Bristol Holdings seem to have put to this, that it's they still don't have a 3rd member, that they've only had 1 quorate meeting, that they've replaced the 2 previous audit committees, which were meeting regularly, it would appear, and they've only managed to, I mean, it sounds like they've achieved a 3rd meeting now since, but for the time frame we're looking at, up to March 2020, so September to March, they held 2 meetings. I guess proportionally that's acceptable, although their terms of reference does state a requirement of a minimum of 3 meetings a year, and it didn't actually give them an exception in the terms of reference that, oh, in part years you can only hold less meetings. But they actually only held 1 meeting because the other meeting was not quorate, so you cannot consider that to be held. It does concern me, given, you know, we are all aware of the risks around Bristol Energy. We're all aware that the main job of Bristol Holdings is to manage those companies, and yet here the audit committee of Bristol Holdings had only 1 meeting between September and March 2020 that was quorate, and that seems to predominantly be because they only appointed 2 members to it, which it was the minimum, and 2 members really is too few. I do not understand why they have not put more effort into this. And I've had my rant, and I'll be quiet now and listen to any further explanation.
Well, I'm very disappointed in that, Tim, because I was going to have that rant. So we are in agreement on this one. Yeah, that's the only note I've got on the whole of this report, because I think actually the documentation is excellent and everything seems to be covered well. That is my one worry, really, that an audit committee of audit committee of 3 is pretty small. An audit committee of 2 was kind of silly, I thought. I would have thought you know just to get one of the reasons we have an audit committee here and not an audit councillor is because we all think of different things. Clive thinks of things that I haven't thought of, and very occasionally I think of things that he hasn't thought of. So and Tim thinks of different, and Liz as well. So you bring different minds to it from slightly different angles, and they think of things that other people don't think of, and that's the point of the committee. And I just think 3 doesn't cover that. I think I think this audit committee should be larger than that. I'd go for 5 as a minimum if it was me. I think that should be looked at again, quite frankly. But as far as the documentation concerned, what everybody's looking at and stuff, I can't fault that. But that's just my point. Anybody else got anything else? Liz.
So I think Clive was next.
Oh, Clive, then Liz.
Thank you. I deliberately delayed my hand so Tim could get in first because I was fed up of winning the race. So I got 2 points here. One is in the report at 1.3. And one of the things I've been trying to work out is weaknesses in the governance of our businesses, because obviously one has gone severely wrong. And my question is, and I'm trying to not be political, this would apply to any mayor of any party. The process of governing the companies is principally with the mayor. So that means the mayor needs a huge amount, any incoming mayor needs a huge amount of training to be able to govern companies, and it needs people that can work and support him or her to do that. So I'm very interested what type of training is provided to the mayor to be able to fulfil this governance role? That's question one. Question two relates to page 91. So I'll give you a chance to have a think about question one. Here we go. Yeah, so it's the Bristol Energy, is item 3 there, page 91, Bristol Energy Audit and Risk Committee Summary. So I read that and thought, everything's going fine at Bristol Energy. I've read that report. They've not flagged up any problems. So I'm afraid I keep saying I'm not assured by our governance of our companies. And I've found, well, I'll wait for the answer to number one, but the answer to the second one is it's just not publishing the reality. But number one, the training of the person who's in charge of governance, which currently is the mayor and will be any future mayor.
So I'm not sure that that first question is a question for me, Councillor.
Oh, yeah, I'm asking anyone who wants to answer them. Tim?
Okay, well, yes, it clearly isn't for Chris, and quite frankly, I'm not entirely sure who it would be for. Certainly not for me either. I don't really know how to comment on that.
So who sets up the governance? It was recently changed. It was changed in the last year. So I think that was Cabinet, but I'm not certain.
I don't know. It looks like nobody knows. I'd say it was a fair bet, but I don't know for sure.
Okay, well, I've got two issues there that can go away as action points. I don't need an answer right now.
Okay.
These are long-term issues.
Okay, I've got hands up from Helen and
yeah.
I'll let Helen. Helen's got a more hands-on, literally response,
Okay.
Chair. So I'll let her respond. But I was going to come back on that point. Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Helen.
Problem. So this point is very high level, but what it is to do is to point at the rest of the governance structure which sits within the council. So the mayor or his delegate, I think, is the key part to read in that. So Councillor Cheney, as the cabinet member for finance, governance and performance, has been delegated formally the role as shareholder representative, which is the executive function on behalf of the council, to act as representative of the shareholder. And we have the shareholder group, which is an advisory group that sits around Councillor Cheney. It itself has the statutory offices of the council on, so it has the Section 151 officer, the head of paid service, chief executive, monitoring officer. It also has an independent shareholder advisor. And then the holding company itself comes to that shareholder group and provides the more detailed due diligence and advice to the shareholder as well. So that's a very short sentence, which is actually just kind of pointing at the rest of the governance structure that sits within the council.
Okay, that's very helpful. So Penny doesn't want to speak. Clive indicating he wants to come back.
I just want to come back on that. But the buck, according to this document, stops with the mayor. And so I was after what type of training does the mayor or the future mayor, current one might not need any more training, losing all that money is a very good learning experience. But what type of training do we provide for the future mayor? That's my question. And also,
well, it sounded to me that the answer to the question, Clive, was that none is necessary because he's delegated the power to Craig Cheney. So I guess you might want
okay, so what training does Craig get? I know he's an accountant, but governing a large company is different than accountancy qualifications. Any one of us would go into that role. We'd all need different training, wouldn't we, in order to bring us up to a level to be able to do it. These are big companies.
Okay, Penny.
Chair, can I respond just very briefly on the issue of training? Certainly, my arrival as shareholder liaison director was subsequent to the current structure that Helen's described, certainly as far as the individual officers are and members are concerned who are part of that overall approach to the way in which these issues are managed. However, had we gone forward with the elections that were planned in May, then Helen and I had already started discussing what that induction programme needed to look like. And in fact, I had spoken directly to Lucy Fleming in Dem Services about how we would need to address some of the issues that you quite rightly have raised, Councillor Stevens. So that matter was in hand, but in the circumstances that we were faced with the pandemic, the actual programme itself has not gone forward. We have also, and I know Chris will reflect this, spoken to Holdco about the need for training, and that will be part of what we would expect to have reported back subsequently, as you would expect any organisation that wishes to demonstrate its levels of good governance and practice anyway. So that is on the agenda.
Okay, that's very helpful. Now, I've lost track of who had their hands up before. Am I missing anybody? Liz.
Thank you, Chair. I think just following on from what Clive said, going back to what I mentioned at the corporate risk register, was what commercial experience do our project managers and our people who are in charge of these commercial ventures, what experience do they have? So any training that we can give them if they have no commercial background, I think is incredibly important, and also having that advisory group. That was going to be one of my questions. It mentioned on this report that it has gone to the shareholders and it was coming to us. Has this report gone to the Bristol Holding Shareholders Advisory Group?
No, it hasn't. Not in this. This come here first. It's come from the Audit and Risk Committee directly to yourselves.
And so that's going to them shortly, is it?
I'm not sure what the protocol is in that, but I would, Helen, maybe you can help me. I'm not sure whether that's the normal protocol for this report to go to the shareholder group.
Yeah, so it will do, but the protocol is it comes here first. Our next formal meeting, the shareholder group, is in September, so this is going to be circulated after this meeting with actually the comments from this meeting. So anything.
Our next meeting is the 8th of September.
And that's the advisory group, so that will go to them. Yes. That's lovely, thank you. And just going through the report, am I right that it's the Bristol City Council internal audit team that undertake the internal audit for the holding group?
Absolutely, yes, it is.
Unless
there are some instances where there are certain specialist skills required where that's subcontracted, but the main audit is at the council's internal audit service.
That was going to be my next question, because it is a very niche market, particularly the energy firm, and I was concerned as to whether our internal audit had the capability to do that. So anything that has been done by external auditors, that's not included in this report?
The summary would be, if it was part of the report that went to the audit committee. What I've summarised there is the reports that were presented to their audit committee, to the audit and risk committee, which were all, in this case, undertaken by the internal audit team.
Right, okay, so there hasn't actually been anything during this particular period done by any external auditing teams?
I think there was some work done on the Juniper system, which had to be done externally, but it wasn't a formal audit. It was just a review of the Juniper system as a systems review. Yeah.
And who would decide when to bring in those external auditing teams?
That would be a management decision within the company.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just clarify? So when you say, you mean Simba doesn't decide, as that Bristol Holdings themselves decide whether they need somebody else? Is that correct?
Well, we wouldn't do it. I can't argue for what happened before Bristol Holding we came, you know, before September when we came into being. But certainly we wouldn't work with an external company without the consultation with internal audit in the first instance. So I think it's important that we have that shared understanding of who's reviewing what elements of any systems and processes.
Okay, so that's fair enough. Okay.
Would it be useful to have Simba to just confirm the role of internal audit in this instance, and to just give you clarity in terms of the type and nature of the work that they do, and then where other external expertise is required, I think, just for completeness.
Okay, Simba.
Thank you, Chair. Our role is that we are commissioned by Bristol Holdings to do internal audit work within the group. So because we are commissioned, we have to do what we agree with Bristol Holdings. It's different from what we do for the council, because we are internal auditors for the council. So we can actually, we determine with management the assurance requirements for the council. What is different with Bristol Holdings that they are commissioning us, they are asking us to come and provide assurance to them. So what we end up doing is we can work with Bristol Holdings senior management and the audit committee and give them, let's say, in what we think or our proposal, but they will need to review that. And we might propose to say, we are going to do 200 days, but they will say, no, we only have 35 days. So we end up doing 35 days for Bristol Holdings. So what is important is that we are commissioned by Bristol Holdings to do work for them. And for that work that we do, we report that work to Bristol Holdings. But I also attend all their audit committee meetings. So I am privy to the conversations, and we worked with them to determine what needs to go on the plan. But ultimately, what we do for them is determined by them. And that's the reason why we don't give them an annual opinion, because at times I do not do enough work to enable me to give them an opinion. So it will come down to what Bristol Holdings have asked us to do.
Okay, thanks, Simba. Right, okay, that's the end of that item.
Sorry, Chair, there was, Chair, if I may, Councillor Stevens did refer to another matter that he did want to answer. Just for completeness, and it is hard to appreciate that when, particularly with the company that we're talking about, that the matters in that report seem positive. But what I would say is that those matters that were reviewed as part of those reviews in between last April and September 2019, which included the risk management strategy of Bristol Energy, matters to do with billing and wholesale trading and forecasting, and as well as those matters that were undertaken then by the internal audit, that there were no major areas of concerns within those areas. That doesn't mean, obviously, that there weren't other areas, and particularly with regards to business which happened later, that obviously would clearly impact upon that. But at that time, those issues were deemed to be satisfactory.
Okay, thank you very much. We've been doing this for about, let's see, an hour and 3/4 now, and we have a ways to go. I suggest we probably need a break of some sort, and to refresh ourselves in whatever way. And so perhaps if we just take 10, and we'll be back here in about 10 minutes time. Okay. I can't see my own picture. Is everybody back yet?
Most of us are here, I think.
Okay. Ah. Okay.
That was a very welcome break. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. No problem. Yes, Councillor Jackson said to me, well, there's not much on the agenda, is there? This shouldn't take long. He's still trying to get back, by the way. He's at a neighbour's house trying to connect to their Wi-Fi now. So we may see.
Can he not do it off his chip on his iPad?
Pass.
Wi-Fi off.
No idea.
That. Turn your Wi-Fi off. Your chip and the iPad will automatically kick in.
Yeah. I don't know.
Not a cheap approach in the long term, but it would do for an hour.
Yeah, emergencies. Yeah. Okay. Right.
But you do have to turn the Wi-Fi off on the iPad for the chip to kick in. If it's still on, the chip won't kick in.
Right.
So it's got all of our iPads have a little phone chip in for emergency connection when we can't connect to Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I've used it occasionally where I work. The signal's just terrible, but it's not so bad for the phones. Yeah. Okay, I think we'll make a start. So item, just a moment, 15 on the agenda. Okay, it's Grant Thornton Audit Planning Report 2019 to 2020.
Sorry, Chair, I think we've skipped over the statement of accounts and annual government statement. That before that, they were on the supplementary publication, though.
Yeah, I know, got supplementary. I thought they were after all this. Okay.
So we've got 13 and 14.
We'll do that first then. Yeah. All right. Let's start with the annual governance statement. A mere 22 pages.
Chair, I'll take that one.
Okay.
So the report presents the draft annual governance statement for members' consideration. Members will be aware that it's a statutory requirement to publish the governance statement alongside the annual accounts. The statement's meant to be an accurate reflection of the governance risk and control arrangements in place. It's meant to reflect the arrangements during 2019-20 and up to date of signature. So it needs to be currently up to date. And it's meant to identify any significant shortcomings in the governance arrangements. The statement's been prepared on behalf of management following a review process that has involved multiple sources of assurance. Managers from across the council and the companies have provided assurance or otherwise regarding the risk, governance and control arrangements in place. Some key officers have provided assurances in their specific areas, so the Section 151 officer and the monitoring officer and the senior information risk owner. Information from oversight functions has also informed the review process, as has independent reports such as the Chief Internal Auditor's report, annual report, and external inspection reports have been reviewed as well, and that's contributed to the statement. In terms of consultation, senior management were consulted, and CLB have all seen the statement, and the Deputy Mayor has also been provided with the statement, although we haven't had feedback as yet because he hasn't had it that long. And it's now with the Audit Committee for your review and input as well. I won't talk in detail through the statement, but to just briefly canter through it, I think the important things to say are that rather than set out the detail of the governance framework itself, the aim was to provide a shorter statement this year, which focused on the review of effectiveness. Section 2 of the statement provides the conclusions of the review process and includes an opinion on how the governance arrangements were working at paragraph 2.2. and also acknowledges the Chief Internal Auditor's limited assurance opinion at section 2.3 in section 2. Section 3 of the statement just provides a very brief overview of the key elements of the governance arrangements, and section 4 provides details of improvements that have been made over the period as well. Given that the statement needs to be up to date at the time that it's considered and signed, it's important that the impacts of the COVID pandemic on governance arrangements are also reflected in the statement. For the majority of the year, the governance arrangements weren't affected, but obviously towards March, in March and going forwards, they have been. So section 5 reflects those impacts. Section 6 details the results of the review of the effectiveness, and it's based along the three key lines of assurances that we've drawn on in formulating the statement, and particularly draw your attention to paragraph 6.12, which refers to the audit committee's oversight of governance. So the committee needs to ensure that the statement also picks up any issues that it's been concerned about. Section 7 is where we detail the significant governance issues identified as part of the review process. The definitions of what makes an issue significant are earlier on in the report, para 3.8 of the covering report, page 5, I think, on these papers. So there are 4 significant governance issues the committee will see: COVID-19, Bristol Energy. This is where members will have seen the SEND reference, because SEND has been identified as a significant governance issue, and then the equalities, diversity and inclusion. Section 8 then goes on to detail other improvements that the review process has identified. They're not considered significant, but we just wanted to reflect to ensure the statement was a transparent reflection of them. In the majority of in some of those cases, I'm aware that actions are already being taken to address those things. So really, that's all I wanted to say on the statement. I'll do my best to answer questions, and I'm sure other officers will help me if I struggle.
Okay, before I throw things open, and Clive managed to get in before Tim this time, there's something I'd like to raise, and I'm laughing at Clive, but this is quite a serious thing. Section 2.3. Now, we were talking, when we were receiving Simba's report before, we were talking about the limited assurance opinion provided by the Chief Internal Auditor, and it says we recognise the improvements required in some key operational areas. So yes, it's in there, but I think the average person reading that, I don't know, seems a little tame to me. I don't know how I would phrase it, but it does. But there's no sense of 53% didn't pass. It's not like that, is it? It sounds a little gentle for me. I don't know what anybody else thinks. I'll let Clive come with his question now. Clive?
Thank you. 3 things, well, 4 things, because I apologise, I only got this report today because I got back from holiday yesterday. So I think we'll be looking at this again, but quickly scanning it. Firstly, I think, Tim, I remember in full council, November, December 2018, you picked out, it was SEND, I think they were trying to ration EHCPs, was it, to 3 per school or something? And I think that type of thing, that was significant to me. So in a minute, you might want to mention that in case you've forgotten. When did the institutional racism thing come up? Was that in this year, in 1920? And finally, should we be looking at the one city plan and activities around that? The answer is I don't know, and that's actually a question. So those three things. One is Tim and the rationing of EHCPs. One is the institutional racism, and then whether the one city plan needs to have some form of audit.
I can answer the second one of those. So the institutional racism was a significant issue last year. And I think the committee was provided with a report earlier this year with an update with all of that. But the committee will also note that the equalities, diversity and inclusion is also a significant issue in this year's as well. SEND is also a significant issue in this year's, so we've picked that up. And I'm not sure about the one city plan. I don't know if anyone else can.
I just possibly add to that. So I don't believe that this committee has been provided with an update report on institutional racism. I don't recall it coming unless it was at a committee meeting that I wasn't at. But Cabinet and Council have been provided with an update of the equality inclusion work that's taking place. I think the point that was picked up and addressed as part of the annual governance statement previously was the complaints that had been received. And I think the update was just basically whether or not those complaints had been addressed, which is different to the point made. The wider discussion about progress has taken place at Cabinet and Council. Would be my response to that one. The second, sort of the third of your questions, which is in relation to the One City Plan. The One City Plan is a partnership document that is, which comprises input from all partners. Our contribution to that is our corporate strategy. So some of the challenge will be around the delivery of the corporate strategy, which is sort of says this is how Bristol City Council will deliver in actually, in their role and in delivering their element of the One City Plan. So I don't believe that it would be, Audit Committee's role to actually review the One City Plan governance, but actually the corporate strategy and how we are delivering as a City Council, just being clear what's the city responsibility and what's the City Council.
Okay, thanks very much, Denise, very helpful. Thank you.
About the issue of the EHCPs. Or shall I wait till it's my turn?
You might as well. I think Kai's finished anyway, isn't he? So yeah.
Well, it's a bit unusual for a committee member to ask another committee member a question, but I'll try to do it as factual as I can. I think it was not a cap on EHCPs. So I'm trying to record, of course, in the right timeline. There was a sort of cap introduced for top-up funding applications last year. And it did cause a lot of controversy. During the same year, which was EHCPs, but it was a different matter, for a while the council refused to process EHCP applications. It was sort of November, December, the idea being because they were overwhelmed, they'll get back to it in January, and perhaps for a week, applications were deleted. I would say senior managers did step in, reversed that policy and asked anyone who had applied during that week to reapply. That policy did not last very long, but that was not a cap on EHCPs for schools. I think if I recall right, it was an issue regarding top-up funding, which is about additional funding. You'll be aware of this, additional funding for children with SEND on top of the standard sort of pot of SEND money given to schools.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got that covered in this then. Liz?
I had two things. One was the same as you, Mark, the concern about the 47%. I thought that actually needed to be stronger because to me it's not much of an achievement. I mean, it is an achievement, but it's not enough of achievement. And the other was the chart on page 12 It's a lot of information and it's good, but it needs resizing and tidying up a bit because it's all the boxes aren't quite accurate. But it's a good chart. It's nice to a nice visual.
Okay, yeah.
Then yes, Simba.
Sorry, no, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. I'll come in to do my bits now. So the good news is I'm not going to be quite as critical of this one as I was of last year's one, only last month. I'm pleased to hear that we're not going to be voting on this today, and I take this as sort of perhaps our feedback to this draft document, and later on it will hopefully be brought back to us. It sounds like possibly in August, possibly later. I had a few issues I wanted to raise in it, and I'm going to try to make sure I stay politically neutral. So I'll skip over one or two of my more ranty notes and keep more to the perhaps the more factual notes. I'm still not. I heard Denise's reply regarding the pay policy. I myself have read through the guidance note and have a different interpretation, but I will go off to find out if there is a clear interpretation of that. It refers to severance packages and severance pay. My interpretation of that is that would include top-ups to people's pensions, but I accept that might be something I need to go off and check. So I won't rant on about that. I'm just flicking down through it now to find my next comment. And here we go. So there's a couple here really. Firstly, improvements made. And improvements made is listed the Bristol Holdings Audit Committee. The same audit committee that we were far less than impressed with only 20 minutes ago. And it may now be a great audit committee, but of course this is a 1920 document. So I'm judging it very much on 1920, where it had one Corporate meeting. I personally think it's stretching it, to put it mildly, to put that down under improvements made. Perhaps improvements we're working on and we hope to be getting there might be a bit more accurate, but I thought that was more than stretching it really. And that, to be clear, that is page 15 of the document, a nice pinky bit, and it's referring there to the Audit and Risk Committee of Bristol Holdings. Now, as I said, that may become a robust audit committee, but at the moment, I would say that we have not seen the evidence of that, and I don't think there's strong evidence of that in the 1920 period. Hopefully, the 2021 period will be different for it. And then I wanted to raise, so yes, under 6.15 and 6.14, so 6.15 actually, it raises the issue of the Ofsted inspection and just gives actually the outcome of that inspection. It doesn't actually refer to any action, but further down on page 20, it does then refer to send, and some of the actions have been taken. When you read this, it very much gives a strong impression of improvement. I just want to state that increased monitoring does not necessarily mean improvement. What is evidenced here is definitely an increase in monitoring by senior managers, which is welcome. I would say that there is currently no evidence of increased improvement in SEND, and I think the wording there should perhaps reflect that there's increased monitoring. There is a written statement of action with an action plan, but I think it sort of implies that things are improving, and I would say that if we were to do an evidence check, it may be the other way around, but certainly no evidence I see is included here to back up perhaps an implication of improvement. So under significant governance, yes, governance potentially is improving in the sense of monitoring, but it is actually about action and decision making, and whether those actions and decisions are actually bringing forward improvement in service. And I think the jury is currently out on that. I'm just going through to see if I've got any more. That's it. You'd be pleased to hear.
Thank you, Tim. So two distinct issues there. I think if we didn't make the same comments on this with regard to the holding audit and risk committee that we made on the other document, well, that would be silly, wouldn't it? So I think we have to assume that our comments for the governance statement are the same as before. That we feel that the committee is too small and so on. With regard
sorry to interrupt, Chair. I think John Roberts wants to come in. You may not be able to see him on your screen because he's not spoken in a while.
Okay. Hi, John.
Hi there, and thank you, Chair. It's a tricky one on the annual governance statement because it has to be current up until the time that the accounts are signed off and published and audited. So working to the timetable of 30th of November, you have to almost sort of time travel a little bit because the statement will need to be current as at the 30th of November. So some of the points and observations Councillor Kent made about it being sort of pinned back to the 1920 year is not actually strictly correct in the context of the annual governance statement. So it could well be that closer to the time that we sign off that improvements are made, and the committee would have to be comfortable in that context.
So, well, okay, Tim wants to come back. I was going to do it for him.
I want to come back because that's a perfectly reasonable statement by our external auditor, and I don't like to disagree with him. I do want to remind members at our last meeting, when I raised issues about the annual statement, I was told that in no way were we able to rewrite that or change those because they'd been agreed the previous year, despite the fact that there were, as far as I was concerned, factual inaccuracies in it. It's interesting we're told one thing one meeting and then another meeting, and I'm certainly would never disagree with our external auditor. I do wonder about some of the advice we were given at our last meeting then when I raised issues about the content of the previous year's annual governance statement. I'll shut up now because I've had my say.
Simmer wants to make a point on this.
I think just to help, I think the difference between today and last meeting, Councillor Kent, is that at the last meeting, the audit committee had already approved the AGS, but this meeting, until the final day, we bring the AGS as the final document to be approved, you can still change it. So you haven't made a decision today. So today you are just contributing and informing, and that will take those considerations and go back. But last time, the AGS had already been approved by the audit committee, but in this case, we are still debating, so you can still consider whatever we want to consider. I just want to make that clear that there is no contradiction in terms of the conversation. Only last time, it has already been approved by the audit committee, it was ready to go, but this time it's still open.
But then if we leave it till next time, we might forget. Right. With regard to the holding audit and audit committee, I think that stays relevant even when they're meeting regularly and they've moved up to 3 people, because we said we thought it should be more than that. So I think that we should keep in, and if that changes by August or November or whenever we actually vote on it, well, all well and good, we'll take it out again. But as it stands, I think that should stay in. The position with the send, I know far less about this than I should perhaps, but certainly I'm not sure what to say about send, quite frankly. I mean, does anybody else have any comments on this besides Tim? Clive?
Yeah, I think it was John, wasn't it? John Roberts said that this is going to be up to 30th of November. So even if we bring this back to a meeting in August, we're still going to be predicting the future.
Yeah. And
the impact of COVID-19 over those coming months up till 30th of November could be huge, because we will then be looking at the following budget year. And that's where we lose our business rates, we lose our council tax. So I'm not going to give you an answer. I don't have an answer. I'm just saying, possibly we should wait until November to do this, because some things might be improving, but other things might be going down. And in order to make this as accurate as possible, we need to leave it as late as possible.
Maybe potentially, sorry, Chair, can I just respond marginally to that? So we will need to publish the accounts at 31st of August for inspection, which will include the AGS. And the expectation is at that point that those documents have been approved by the City Council, subject to the external audit. There is also a point in terms of, starting to deliver on the actions report and monitor. So in reality, if we leave all of this until after approval by external audit, then there's a risk that doesn't happen on the 30th of November. And in reality, we want to start to implement the actions and do the action plans that we agree and be able to bring back reports. So my own view is that we need to agree as a City Council our accounts and our AGS by publication. Otherwise, we're opening this to public inspection in a document that we haven't agreed ourselves. So therefore, we need to have the view of what we agree, and then it will be subject to change. If there is something specific that external audit believe needs to change and be reflected based on their audit findings and where we are as at that point in time.
I mean, having thought about this for 5 or 6 minutes, how in fact do we assess the degree to which improvement is taking place anyway? Children aren't going to school. It's unlikely that the teachers who are themselves or at home are able to apply. So I think I prefer to leave it as it is. I understand Tim's concerns, and it is an area which is in need of great improvement. But I think it's hard to say that it has improved greatly over the last few months because kids haven't been in school to do this. So I prefer to leave things as they are with that one. So I think we should change with regard to the holding company, but not with this. Apart from Tim, how does anybody else feel about that? Are we happy to go with that?
Sorry, Chair, I'm not sure we can rewrite this document. I'm not too sure. I thought at the beginning of the meeting we said we were going to discuss it with our views.
Yeah.
We'll probably come back.
Yeah.
I don't think it's our document. I mean, what it sort of says is for us to approve it. I'm trying to recall what it actually says in the actual beginning of the document. There is a recommendation, and the recommendation is currently that the audit committee consider and agree.
Yeah.
I am unsure if we have the right to amend it or not.
Well, I think we can make comments.
Yeah, I think comments are, and I hope officers will take on board our comments. On the same thing, just say, I think probably the triggering word for me was assured. I realise assured can be meant in many different ways, but for me, it was implying a little bit too much that progress was assured rather than perhaps the assurance of increased governance, which I suspect is what was meant. I'm not disputing that there's a lot more governance in that area. Yeah. I was sort of worried that it was implying improvement, which is not necessarily proven. I agree with you about the audit committee, but I'll say I'm not sure if we're able to rewrite this or if officers need to go away and just consider what we've said.
Yeah, okay. Clive, I think we'll move on after this one because we've got to.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So, I mean, we need a deadline by which we get back to officers. I mean, I'm suggesting, what's today, Thursday, maybe middle of next week, because today's the first day I saw this report.
Yeah.
And then officers can decide whether or not to take our suggestions on board. Yeah. And we've got an extraordinary meeting in August set up, so this should come to that anyway.
Okay, I guess response is then really that we were all concerned about the holding audit committee, and members also raised issues about SEND and what assurance actually means. Is that okay? We all happy with that?
Yeah, we can review those areas, Chair.
Okay, that's great.
Just want to check that I can give it thought this weekend and feed in rather than just waste my time.
Are you happy with that, Alison?
Yes, absolutely fine. If you email me any thoughts, that'd be fine.
Okay, that's great. And if you could copy me and Clive, and okay, that's the end of right. So next item on the agenda is the draft. This is next, right? I love it when we've got several different documents for the same meeting. Okay. What have we got here? The annual accounts 2019 to 20.
Great, thank you, Chair. I'll just introduce this. I appreciate it was only published on Tuesday and it is over 100 pages long, but just to say that this isn't here for approval, it's for comment, and we'll take comments sort of following this once you've had time to read through it fully. Just to emphasise, as we've been saying throughout the committee today, that this is still a work in progress. There are still areas that's outlined in the cover report that we need to work on, which I'll just briefly go through there. So the statutory publication it's normally the end of May for the draft accounts for public inspection and external audit. That's been extended to the 31st of August, with an expectation of an audited set of accounts by the end of November, which are the accounts to be approved. So the areas that aren't within that need finalisation. So what you'll have is this is the financial statements. What we'll need, including prior to publication, is the narrative report, which is a short report outlining the performance and key strategies of the council, as well as the AGS is incorporated in. Delays on the draft accounts for our subsidiary companies, Bristol Waste, Bristol Energy, have meant that we've been unable to consolidate the group accounts at this point, but that will be required prior to the end, and we're working closely with them to make sure we get those as soon as possible for incorporation. The valuation of Bristol holding is still outstanding. Obviously, we're valuing our holdings in our subsidiaries as at the 31st of March. The decision made on the 2nd of June to progress the sale of Bristol Energy is a post-balance sheet event. And as it's a decision to sell, it's a non-adjusting. However, the process through which we're going through is such that it's providing additional information as to the potential carrying value of our holdings in Bristol Energy at that point in time. So we're just making sure we have the latest evidence and available information to fully reflect the valuation at that point in time, which is as much evidence as possible to reflect the investment at the 31st of March. So what you've got in front of you is the full accounts and balance sheet and I&E. However, particularly the valuation of Bristol Holding will impact some of the primary statements. So it will impact on our long-term investments and reserves on the balance sheet. It will impact on our income and expenditure cash flow, also the financial instrument notes and the EFA note 6 and 7, which is our expenditure and funding analysis, which is a key note in understanding how we get from what's reported to Cabinet in terms of our outturn position to what's in the accounts. These are obviously technical accounts delivered in according to the CITFA code and financial accounting standards. So without going through the full detail, the key, just to move to page 13 of the supplementary, is the income and expenditure. That shows by directorate our overall cost of service. There's no, for those less familiar with the accounts, there's no budgetary information here. So when we talk about a surplus or deficit, this is literally about income and expenditure. So a deficit here of 35.8 million on the provision of services. Notes the EFA note 6 and 7. It's not, we haven't published this at the moment. We're having technical issues within our system, but that will provide a bridge between what you'll recognise from Cabinet monitoring reports to this report, which includes things like capital adjustments, but also brings in dedicated schools, grant and housing revenue accounts in one place. I'll just go quickly over a few key things on the balance sheet, and then I'll welcome any questions or comments. So the balance sheet shows our overall position as at the 31st of March. As you'll see, sort of our long-term investments have increased from 3.184 billion to 3.3 billion. Property, plants and equipment has increased, and that shows our investment in capital includes predominantly our council dwellings within the HRA, but also all our property and equipment. Long-term investments shows that it's gone up by 10 million. That includes our investment in Bristol Holding, which is yet to be impaired. So that's a key line which will change once we progress the valuation of that. Another thing just to highlight that looks a little odd, just to explain what it is, the cash and cash equivalents, 7 million, increasing to 69 million. We did take out 30 million of PWLB loans during the year. But also this is a reflection that at the end of the year, we held more money in our instant access cash equivalent money market funds rather than in short-term investments. And this is just to reflect the fact that actually holding it in short-term investments was gave just as good a return as putting it out for up to a year. So that's just a small change in sort of our treasury management, our strategy at the year end, which shows a bit of a change. So I'll pause there. There's further detail in all the notes, and it should all be referenced. As I say, again, it's a work in progress. And if you'd like the opportunity for an extraordinary committee prior to the publication for public inspection at the 31st of August, we'd be happy to facilitate that.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Tim.
Okay, I'll keep them brief because this is only our first look at them. So I just want to sort of go to a couple of things which I was a little unsure of. On page 80 of this document, the parent company guarantees listed and the value are listed at. I recall it was they were valued at around 15 million for the accounts before. They're valued at sort of 5.4 million now. Is that because those parent guarantees have gone down, or is that sort of a risk estimate of them?
So if you recall from the ISA 260 from last year, the exposure on the parent company guarantees is different to the provision we're required to make by our accounting standards. This is a risk adjusted percentage based estimate. So in the ISA 260 last year, it was around 800,000 was our agreed position with Grant Thornton. Obviously, the position at 31st of March it has changed significantly in terms of likelihood, and the position of Bristol Energy as noted previously. Okay,
that's great. You've just answered that question. That clarifies that line for me a great deal. Okay, and then finally, quite a simple one actually, and you might say it's nothing to do with the accounts. Right on the last couple of pages, pages 94 and 95, are lists of contracts, I think, transactions, yes, between the companies we own and Bristol City Council. My question here is, what about contracts and financial transactions between the companies? So let's say, as an example, let's just say if Bristol Energy and Technology Services Limited, which apparently is a dormant company, was doing services for Bristol Waste, would those be reflected in these accounts or not?
No, this is the single entity account. So this is the related parties between Bristol City Council and its subsidiaries, not between the two. The related party transactions between them will be shown in their each individual company accounts.
And so this game very much is a hypothetical error. Even if those contracts were awarded at a Bristol City Council level, they would then not appear in these accounts.
I might have to take that away and clarify that. Just I don't want to give you wrong advice.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just confirm the question. Is the question whether Bristol City Council have commissioned work or whether the companies have between? because that's a different, if it's Bristol City Council commissioned activity, it should be in our accounts as a single entity accounts.
So what I'm wondering is we've got quite a few companies here, some of which may or may not be doing some trading with each other. And then the question mark is if they are doing trading with each other, you could sort of understand Bristol Waste could be going around collecting people's waste. And let's be honest, that would seem a bit bizarre to have to reflect in the accounts. But at the same time, it is possible the council could use one company to do work for another, which was authorised by the council rather than perhaps through the natural trading routes of the companies. And my question then is, if that was to occur, and I accept this is completely hypothetical, would that be reflected in our accounts? So I'm not thinking really Bristol Waste collecting someone's waste. I'm thinking far more substantial. Maybe an example like Bristol Technology Services doing a massive ICT delivery contract for one of our companies, or broadband, putting in consultancy for broadband or something like that. Would that be reflected, especially if that was awarded at, I would have said, a political level or a city council level?
So I think each company operates as a separate entity and makes their own decisions, and the details of the decisions they've made will be reflected within their accounts. If the council has advised or recommended, etc., I think that's what you're referring to. If the council has recommended a certain activity, if we don't have it in the business plan, etc., then the companies are still making their own independent decisions. I wouldn't expect to see the contractual arrangements between the two reflected in our single entity, but when we consolidate, we obviously have to do all of the contra entries to ensure that we are appropriately consolidating and not duplicating any of the details.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Ollie has his hand up. Ollie?
Hello, Chair. So it took me a moment to unmute myself again. I'm loving this Zoom as much as anyone. So well, I'm not quite sure what, I've got two different page numbers on my screen. So it could be 41, it could be 34, and it's item 13 under the remuneration and stuff. And I was just noticing that we had a person who'd been on, admittedly initially as an interim for a rather large sum of money, who then stayed on as a project manager after they'd been replaced for another large sum of money. That's in the smaller print further down on the page. And I just wasn't quite sure what project they'd been running and whether we couldn't have got rather better value for money, because I would have thought the project manager wouldn't have struggled in most businesses to earn that much money in such a short period of time. But is there a way of finding out more about that? Not necessarily at this meeting. It might be that there's a way of finding out elsewhere as to what this person was actually doing, because it seems like a loss of money for.
We can refer that back to the commissioning officer and get a summary from the executive director responsible for that area.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Clive.
Thank you, Chair. Just a little on from that, on page 4, it's 44 electronic, oh, it's written, stamped down 44. You've got the remuneration by pay band, and we've got 176 employees, not schools, who are on 50,000 or more. So for an organisation of 4,000 people, maybe that's right or not. So 176 people. Then if you go up to the page that Ollie was talking about, which is 41 electronic or 34, it says where a senior officer's annual salary is 50,000 or more, but less than 150,000, remuneration is disclosed individually. But we've got 176 people who are earning 50,000 or more, and yet they're not here. Mike wants to answer.
Yeah, so the detailed guidance in the regs states that for anybody paid over 150, a salary of over 150,000, we publish their job title and their name.
Yeah.
Anybody above 50,000 who also holds either a statutory or a senior role, and we're understanding that in terms of the regs to be our executive team, we also publish their job title. So that's why in that table, you'll see our statutory officers and also our senior leadership team. The regs also state that it is likely that there will be staff above 50,000 but don't hold a senior role, and they define it. We can circulate the narrative within the guidance that states that they basically have a direct influence over significant operations of the authority.
I think that would be worth putting in. I know these are draft because you've basically got 168 people who are earning over 50,000 who aren't senior, and that could easily be misinterpreted, like I just have. So that needs to be explained, I think. You know, somebody earning 90 grand or 95 grand, for them to earn so much money and not be senior just doesn't seem right in the normal sense of the word. I know we're in a council, so we suspend normality from time to time. So maybe this is one of those occasions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Clive. That seems to be it as far as the draft accounts are considered. Tim?
Sorry, Chair. Clive's question around that flagged something up with me, and I was interested in the interpretation of where £150,000 falls, because I noticed in one line, as an example, the coroner, their pay is below, their salary, fees and allowances is below £150,000, but they are named because their total cost is above £150,000. When you take into account their pension contribution, now what I'm interested here is why the pension contribution, which hits the £150,000 limit, then is applied, but is not applied when making an exit package for whether or not someone should be referred to full council. It seems a very interesting interpretation of when we count money and when we don't count money.
I don't think the coroner works for us. I think we just pay them.
Well, the coroner is actually appointed by Bristol City Council. It is within our terms. We have to appoint them. The point is they're listed here. Their pay, their actual salary is below the £150,000, but they are named as if they were earning above £150,000. That's because of their pension contribution, which puts them over the top. But at the beginning of the meeting, we were told those people who had exit packages of over £100,000 were not referred to full council.
Yes.
A lot of that involved pension contributions, which I fully understand would involve pension contributions. It seems to me as if an interpretation of when a salary is a salary is different in different places. So
I disagree with that statement in that the guidance sets out how we count remuneration and how that 150,000 is derived at, which includes salary, any bonuses, allowances, compensation for loss of office, and also contributions to pension. Because obviously that's the employer's contribution to that person's pension when they come to take it. The difference between redundancy packages is it's a strain on pension fund costs. It's not a contribution into their pension fund. It's about maintaining the pension fund the pension they have rather than an increase in it. So it is subtly different in terms of counting the pension, but that's why it's slightly different and nuanced in these two areas.
Thank you very much, Mike. Yeah, okay. I think we've done quite a lot on officers' salaries. Didn't do anything at all on council houses or anything else, but officers' salaries we've looked at quite extensively. We do that quite a lot. Don't know what that means. Anyway, let's. I think we've finished with our nascent accounts with the information missing, necessarily missing, and I think thank you very much for that. And we will see them a couple of times yet, and I'm sure we're debating some of these issues again. Okay, right. We're now on to Grant Thornton, I believe, going back to a different document. So, yep, Grant Thornton Audit Planning Report 2019 to 2020. And that will be John.
Thank you, Chair. I'll introduce the document, but assume it's read. The plan sets out our responsibilities under the Code of Audit practice. Importantly, because of the circumstances we're in with COVID and so on, and as has been already commented on at the meeting today, it's a backward-looking plan. It's a plan to address the audit risks of the 1920 financial year, with the reporting date being 31st of March 2020. So when COVID actually started, and the sort of the heat of COVID really was on or around that time. So whilst COVID has an impact on this plan, it doesn't have as great an impact on certain areas as you might expect. So for example, under our value for money audit, we're not looking at a significant risk of how the council has responded as a whole to COVID. I think that would be something for our value for money audit for next year. To introduce this document, I won't sort of page turn. There's a lot of detail in it, but I'll talk about 4 themes. The first is logistics, and it's important that we will be doing the audit in very unusual circumstances. We have just had a practice run, if you like, of how to audit remotely, in that we've just completed our portfolio of NHS audits. And we can sort of report back there that, you know, it is perfectly possible to audit remotely. We've got good technology, good secure file transfer technology that we're already using with your officers. So that helps the audit to work as smoothly as we can in terms of exchanging documents, information, and audit evidence. We've also got the communications technologies such as these Zoom calls, which again are proven you know, an excellent way of auditing remotely. In fact, the sort of the crisis has probably brought on innovation and brought on progress in this area. So those are sort of the positives that we've learned from the logistics, and we do have the extended timescale that the Secretary of State has granted for reporting this year to the end of November. But we also know there are challenges. So being offsite the entire time does actually take longer for various reasons in terms of our own internal arrangements, our ability to work as a team and work effectively. Coaching trainees, for example, is a harder thing to do remotely, but also the interface between officers. Even though we have all this effective technology, there is no substitute on occasions to actually being in the same place as people. So we'd be looking to mitigate those particular challenges by perhaps, you know, on occasion doing work face to face and in person. We also know that previous audits have taken a long time. Jackson's going to give the committee you know, a final position on last year's audit, and our predecessor auditors did take a long time on their audits. But we do know going into this audit now that the plan deals with, that we know a lot more about you as an audited body than we knew last year. So all the learning from that first year of audit is all under our belts from both sides, really. So that will help. But also, you know, clearly there is going to be complexity around COVID and what impact that has from a technical side of things. And that's the second main area I wanted to draw out, the technical aspects of the audit. We set out significant risks, which start on page 150, and in each of these areas that run for the next number of pages, those are the sorts of risks that you would find in the council's audit plan anyway. But in each of those areas, there will be a consequence and an impact of COVID. So, for example, if we take management override of controls on page 151, in this area of work, we test the journals predominantly that the council puts in place when it closes its accounts, but also the journals it uses to regularly maintain its accounting systems. That's a presumed significant risk for all audits. In the case of COVID, clearly, the council has closed its accounts using a lot more remote working. So there is a risk that journals might be used to bypass controls, for example. So I think that was brought out by one of the members earlier in the meeting. So our audit will need to be live to that risk. It will also, as for all audited bodies in the public sector, as financial pressures of COVID continue to sort of bring to bear, the risk that journals and are used to manage, to override the management controls around financial manipulation is heightened. So again, we'll be doing work to respond to that. That'll be an issue potentially even of greater significance next year than this planning year. Then on valuation of land and buildings, valuation of investment properties, and valuation of the net pensions liability, in all those areas, those are areas of estimate and judgment, and all those areas where the uncertainties created by COVID will have a bearing on your financial statements. And we will be looking at those to a heightened level of detail, particularly on the valuation of properties. There's been recent statements from the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors saying they expect some form of valuation uncertainty within property valuations. Now that statement is changing slightly at the moment, but so we will need to sort of monitor where the RICS advice goes to the valuation community and the impact that has on your reports and also on your audit. I'll come back to companies and Bristol Energy in particular at the end. Then turning to going concern and financial sustainability, both those areas are clearly affected by COVID because they are the sort of the more forward-looking aspects of the audit. Going concern certainly is forward-looking. The financial sustainability work we do under VFM, even though we're looking at the arrangements that were in place up to the 31st of March, we also draw upon evidence of what's happened since the 31st of March as a way of evaluating how adequate and resilient those arrangements were at the time. So those two areas I'm sure will have an impact from COVID. Then we come to the last area that I wanted to draw out, and that is the companies. And again, it's important to clarify to the committee our role. We are the council's auditors. We are the single entity. That's a technical term for that is. We're the single entities auditors. We're also the wider group auditors, but we're not the auditors of the companies specifically, and we're not the auditors of the holding company. But we do work closely with those auditors, PwC. The matter of companies does have an impact on a range of the areas within this audit plan, as you would expect, given the history. And so you'll see it referred to on our key matters set out on page 148, valuations of long-term investments, as Mike has just referred to in the statement of account session. On page 158, our group approach is described on page 149, and also a specific VFM risk that I did want to draw members' attention to on the governance arrangements. Again, this has already been covered in today's meeting. The governance arrangements for the authority's subsidiaries viewed through the lens, our lens and our remit as the council's auditor. But, you know, in terms of how the council uses its arrangements to protect its interests around its companies. And that's set out on page 158. Clearly, that's a complex and significant issue. The information on page 158 is only a very, very thin flavour of the work we'll do there. We've already been fleshing that out in terms of detailed plans, and we've been talking to Denise about those detailed plans, and you know, we're comfortable with the level of rigour and approach that we will take to that particular arrangement. So that's our plan for the year, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Would members want to take the, John's report on progress so far and then take both items together, or rather than doing one at a time? No? Does anybody have anything specific on this that, you know, rather than progress? No?
Together.
Okay. Clive,
Sorry, yeah, I've just got a very quick question on this. It's on page 165, John. So that's the audit quality, and it's the national context. It's basically what external auditors are being encouraged to do and to do better. And especially for second bullet point, improve the consistency of audit teams' application of professional skepticism. Okay, now I'm skeptical often. I'm sometimes professionally skeptical. I do my best. How would better professional skepticism be shown by Grant Thornton?
That's a really good question, actually. And the audit profession is even going further than that. And there's a current review on the audit profession called the Bryden Review, which is encouraging auditors to be suspicious rather than skeptical. So we are professionally skeptical, particularly in those areas of judgment and estimation. So the valuations that the council puts in place, and why I sort of laboured the point around the valuations, those are the key areas of scepticism and challenge within the audit, and journals as well is a key area of scepticism and challenge. We do a great deal more work in those areas now than we've done previous years, and we'll continue to do so. And one of the ways that we enhance our skepticism, which will be an even further addition to this year's audit, is that we bring in experts of our own to help with the challenge of the council's treatment of certain things. So we've got valuations experts, we've got actuarial experts, we've got various different arrangements that across all audit firms we follow to get key data and input from other bodies as well, to challenge what the council is saying.
Okay, and does that mean our fees will go up?
That's reflected in the fees. The fees are generally increasing as a result of that. I think that's been a national issue across private sector and public sector audit, in that, you know, you have to have more audit work done to result in better audits, and more audit work does cost. But it seemed to be an increased spend that's worth having, given the amounts of millions of pounds or billions of pounds worth of money at stake.
And you didn't mention value for money, especially informed decision making, under your improvements to professional skepticism. Was that because you still have to be trusting on that, or
no,
did you just forget to add it?
Sorry, no, we are equally skeptical and independent on the value for money side. The value for money approach, it's an area of debate, and it is an area of reform as well. This is the last year of the value for money style of working that we do under the Code of Audit Practice, which is a relatively high level review of the adequacy of overall arrangements, it all sounds a bit sort of wishy-washy. And so it's been criticised because of that. So to create a greater level of value from the value for money work, you know, increase the depth and skepticism of that work, the National Audit Office has recently revised its Code of Audit Practice for value for money, and we'll be taking you through what those changes mean. The guidance was published, I think, last week, actually. It's available on the National Audit Office's website and explains the background to it, but we thought it would be important for us to take members of this committee through those changes in some form of a workshop similar to the one we did last year.
Oh, that would be useful, and that applies to next year's accounts, though.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
This is the
Thank you,
last
Chair.
year.
Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you, John. Very helpful. Okay, moving right along then to the next item on the agenda, which is also Grant Thornton It's the audit progress report.
And Jackson's going to talk to this, and I'll chip in if and where necessary.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, John. So this is more of our standard progress report that you would be used to seeing when we're not dealing with the ISO 260 audit findings report, which we bring to audit committee. So it's a report of two halves. First report is progress on our responsibilities, and John's just set out our plan to address our two main responsibilities in respect of the financial statements and the value for money conclusion. The second half of the report then is more for information, but sets out some key changes or key reports or pieces of information that may be useful or of interest to members of the audit committee in the wider sector updates and insights. I'll be fairly brief, but I'll turn to page 173 of the agenda pack, which is the progress at July 2020 slide. And I'll briefly look into the past. So we've had a number of audit committee meetings where we've discussed iterations of the ISO 260 and the statement of accounts for 2018-19, the last of which was the 25th of June 2020, where the final version of the statement of accounts was presented and debated. The debate focused mainly on the post-balance sheet event disclosures included within those 18-19 accounts, and also gave the committee an update on a minor update to the interim monitoring officer's salary in 18-19, whereby that was reduced by £19,000. That was covered in the covering report, 25th of June. Subsequent to that, we've received the signed letter of representation, which was also an agenda item in the 25th of June meeting. So we received that this week, along with some updated information on the cash flow forecasts for the council, and it is our intention to sign our audit opinion tomorrow. Now we've received all of that final information, it would be helpful for the committee just to consider and document that letter of representation that was agreed the 25th of June, given it's now the 30th of July, they would still agree that letter of representation. We discussed that, and it was a standard letter of representation that had come to a number of committees, but it would be helpful from our point of view to get that confirmation. And then that will be 2018-19 audit closed. Looking forward to 19-20, John's talked through the high-level plan. We began our planning work earlier in the year, and our more detailed audit, our final accounts audit, is due to begin next week, which will begin auditing those draft financial statements, which committee has also seen, subject to the changes that Mike outlined earlier in the report as well. And on the value for money section, John has just updated what I was going to discuss, which is more the changes coming into place for the 2021 financial year. John's also talked through our significant value for money risks for the 2019-20 audit. Over the page, we also undertake some grant certification. So we look at the certify the annual housing benefits subsidy claim. We've talked a lot about the changes to deadlines for the accounts production and audit. The deadline for the certification of the housing benefits subsidy claim has also moved. It's usually the end of November, but due to COVID, that's been moved to the end of January 21. So an additional 2 months for that claim to be certified. We also certify the teachers' pensions return and the pooling of housing capital receipts return. The teachers' pension return, the deadline still stands at 30th of November. And the pooling of housing capital receipts return, we're awaiting the detailed MHCLG guidance for that. Usually that would be certified in January 2021 is probably our expectation. And we're still awaiting some final pieces of information to complete our work on certification of previous year's returns. The only other point I'll touch on this slide is officers were invited to a COVID-19 financial reporting workshop, which they attended last week, I believe, which was an opportunity for us to go through some of the financial reporting implications of COVID-19. And one of the papers later in the update covers our publication on the impact of COVID-19 on financial reporting in local government. John's touched on audit fees, which is another point on that point. And we've also discussed COVID-19 in some depth, whether that be deadlines or changes to working arrangements or the impact on the accounts. So I won't go into any more detail on those unless there's any questions. And the audit deliverables on page 176 sets out the key documents that you as a committee will see. So the audit plan on this agenda, the next statutory report will be the audit findings report, the ISA 260 report. The remaining pages, as I said, are more of a sector update. I wasn't going to go through those in any detail, but happy to take any further questions.
Okay, thank you, Jackson. Does anybody have any questions for Jackson on this report? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the procurement rules update. This is Denise.
Actually, Matthew King, I think, but I'm just letting him in the meeting now, so just bear with me a second.
Okay.
Matt, can you hear us okay?
I can, yeah.
Okay, so I think we're ready for your item now.
Yeah, would you like me to just give a very quick overview, and then I'll hand over to Matt in terms of why this report is here. So we previously looked at the changes being proposed as part of the constitutional changes last year, and that was then taken through to full council for approval, with some delegations provided to myself and the monitoring officer to make any further technical changes as part of that. Those changes have been made, but I think that some of them are slightly more than what we'd anticipated. So therefore, bringing those back for Matt to just present back to this committee to note, and then to just go through some of those in a little bit more detail. So if I hand over to Matt, he can then give you a very quick overview of that.
Sure, thanks. I believe you should have the papers, so I'll assume that you've got those. So there are, I think, 11 kind of more significant changes. So there are a few typos and stuff like that which has been changed, but in terms of the more substantial stuff, there are 11. They're primarily clarifications associated with as the rules have been in place for kind of 6-7 months. So the first one is just deletion of the word "or license." This is just to avoid a confusion with so there are various types of license which are not covered by the procurement rules. So essentially, and any licenses that are covered by the rules would already fall under the wording that's already there. So essentially, it's to avoid a confusion that might arise. The second item is around a deletion of so this is where the rules don't apply. So this is a list of exemptions, and this is removing one of those items. The reason it's being removed is that actually there's already a clause that covers all of the exemptions around contracting with another public body more accurately. So the bit of law that we would look at in circumstances of working out what was or wasn't exempt is actually the public contracts regulations. And so the reference to the 1970 Act around local authorities is therefore potentially confusing. So we're suggesting removing that.
Matthew, can I interrupt you a second?
Hello, yeah.
Well, and we've read all this. I mean, for me, there's nothing controversial in here. But I was just thinking, it may be that for other members there are controversial things here. If there are, perhaps we should go straight to those. And if there aren't, when we can, finish. Clive does have something controversial, which comes as a great shock. And so does Tim.
I've only got one.
Okay.
So it's in your list, Matthew, of about number 6 or 7. So on page 189, it refers to table 1.
Right, yeah.
Okay, and that's switching between 5,000 and 25,000. You used to have to get 3 different quotes, and now we only have to get 1 or more. And my question is, does that apply to community groups or other groups that are spending, let's say, CIL or Section 106 through the area committees? That always used to be a problem before, where council grants, then the poor community group had to follow Bristol City Council's procurement regulations and drove them bananas.
I think if you, sorry, I'm not massively familiar with that area, but I think if you're talking about the disbursement of grants, the procurement rules don't cover the disbursement of grants.
Okay, section 106 and CIL, is that grants?
Sorry, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Yes, they won't be covered by the procurement rules. They're different arrangements.
They're different. Okay, so I'm just trying to check that that's been relaxed as well, even if it's different arrangements. Can we check that they've gone down to one supplier as well?
They're different arrangements. So I think it's around the grant awards and how you allocate the funding. But they may be different on a scheme by scheme or project by project basis, depending on the outcome that's going to be delivered. I can double check to see if there's anything.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Document and come back.
Okay, my only other thing on procurement is more general. I remember a report coming to us a few months ago, which said that something like 60%, this is, Denise brought it for help, 60% or so of procurement contracts didn't have measurable outcomes, something like that. And I'm just wondering, are these the same procurement rules or is that a different topic? I remember a comment from some service users saying the procurement system wasn't fit for purpose.
So,
just to respond to that, I think that was the report that was brought by the head of service for procurement, providing an update in terms of some of the areas where improvement was required. These rules have changed since then. So again, it was that position was based on the rules being previously applied. These have now been refreshed and changed. I think we're.
You just muted.
Apologies. I think we're due to have a bit more of a deep dive on progress on procurement, contract management and systems somewhere in our work plan. I'm not sure what date that is though, which will be an update on all of that information.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. I finished, Chair, and thank you, everyone.
Okay, Tim.
Actually, I don't think I need to raise mine, thanks.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Matthew? No. Liz is shaking her head. I think we're done with that report, which is also the last item on the agenda. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for contributing. Thank you all for putting up with me in the chair. And I will see you all in September, when we may have something to do with accounts to look at. August, end of August. We may have something to look at accounts. Yeah. Okay, and I'll get that wording around to you later on, include Alison. But I need a break first. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, folks. Bye-bye.